Meeting to order for the Reading Municipal Light Commission. David, you want to call?
Yeah, call the Citizens Advisory Board meeting to order.
Okay. Code of Conduct. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of hearing public comment and expression of the chair on issues on the official agenda. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address. Prior to speaking, it is the role of the chair to maintain order on all public comment or ensuing discussion. Do we have anybody for public comment? I don't see anybody. All right. Our leader's not here yet, so we'll put that off, and the Police Supervisory Board will put that off for a moment. The minutes, I did not get a chance to finish them today, so we're going to hold off on item 4. And Vivek, you have the minutes for the CAB.
Yeah. So the minutes were given pretty late today, but I reviewed them. I'm fine with them. You're fine, and I know Jason was fine with them. Jason was reviewed with them, but George, I don't know if you got to review them. But
I did review them. I was not present at that.
Yeah.
Meeting, so I'll have to abstain from that.
Then it's just 2-0. Then we'll have to hold off, right?
Hold off to next meeting.
Yeah, we'll have to hold off.
Okay. All right. Then we go to item 6, which is the carbon captured fuel cell. Right?
Perfect. Since you're going to be here, we'll look at the very end. Gentlemen, come join you. While that comes up, so joining me, so we've got Michael McNeely. He is with Bloom, both of these gentlemen, Jordan and Michael, with Bloom Energy. Michael's part of the business operations team. We've been working with, I'll give you a quick bio first before I jump into where we are. Michael's got responsibility for projects from origination all the way through to delivery, and his special focus is on utility, low carbon energy transition opportunities, such as the one that we're going to talk about tonight. He's got over a decade of experience in energy storage, solar, and wind project development. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Material Science and Engineering from Rutgers. And then adjacent to him, second to my left, is Jordan Garfinkel. He is also with Bloom. He focuses on legislative and regulatory levers that are enabling distributed generation, hydrogen, and energy transition projects. Jordan's been with Bloom since 2020, but prior to that, he spent about 6 years with Climate Strategies Group at Mass DEP, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, where he worked on clean energy and climate projects. He has a Master's of Science from the University of Michigan, a Bachelor's of Science from St. Louis University. So there, we're going to talk, we've got just 4 or 5 slides that we're going to walk you through on carbon capture fuel cell. It is in the context of our ongoing strategy to uncover opportunities for us to generate energy in territory. The presentation that we did when we were last together, the CAB and the Board of Commissioners, the strategy discussion, talked about the context for that. I will advance one quick slide. Big picture, just to set the stage for everybody. Our charter, our mission, it remains the same, right? Reliable, low-cost, non-carbon energy. And so we have been aggressively looking for opportunities to generate electricity within territory. And we'll talk about some of those in just a few moments. As we talked about before, the economics are favorable, right? It's actually, we're now in a situation where it is, depending upon the nature of the technology, et cetera, but less expensive to generate within territory than to import on the wholesale market. We are at a scale to implement on some of these projects. Many of these projects require some minimum scale, and so the size of RMLD right now, in addition to where we're going, makes it appropriate for us to even look at these kind of projects. Second key thing is the intention behind in-territory generation is to improve our reliability. Our reliability is very good, and up through now, the wholesale market that's managed by Exxon New England has also been very, very reliable. But as you guys know from our previous discussions and listening to comments from Exxon New England, et cetera, while they remain confident in the stability of the network, they are, prompting all of us to think about the adequacy of energy generation and then the transmission of that generation over the next 5 to 10 year period. Again, the sky's not falling, the world's not coming to an end, but we take that and the discussions that we have internally and amongst the other market participants, it is appropriate for us to do in-territory generation from not only an economic perspective, but also a reliability perspective. And of course, as we've always talked about, right, the third element of our mission is non-carbon, and that is to be compliant with the 2021 climate bill. And you guys know the targets, right? 50% non-carbon in terms of energy sales by 2030, 75% by 2040, and then net zero by 2050. Our intention, given our load growth, given a whole bunch of factors at that very bottom, the generation asset timing, our intention is to try and do our first program, which ideally would be a 20 megawatt baseload generation system in roughly 2 years' time. So winter of 25, 26. That other bullet, the Maple Meadows project, which is an 8 to 10 megawatt solar project. We are still pursuing that one. We're still in motion. There's probably a 12 to 18 month delay while title gets cleared on that one before we can move that ball forward. We still want to do that. That project is very, very viable from an economic, for all the different perspectives we talked about. The very last bullet there, you know, the rough plan somewhere in the 29, 30 time frame at another 20 megawatts. And then as we get into the latter part of 2030, see where our load growth is and see as we, you know, what it makes sense in terms of adding additional generation assets. The ultimate goal would be somewhere in the 2040 time frame, roughly, to be about 40% in territory generation, 60 on the wholesale market. And again, for the reasons of reliability, economics, and being non-carbon. The concept of doing stuff now and having this phased, and doing these in blocks of somewhere between, you know, 10 to 30 megawatt blocks, it gives us flexibility to adapt to whatever the market, the wholesale market looks like, what our load growth looks like, the adoption of EVs, the adoption of air source heat pumps. Those are the two key drivers. So this allows us flexibility. The options that we've looked at, we've talked about several of them. Obviously, the very bottom there, solar, PV. We're going to do the landfill, but the other ones that we are pursuing are industrial rooftops, some municipal rooftops. There's some projects near term that we're actually working on with some of your towns specifically. There'll be some residential, but the economics are great with solar PV. We like it. We're going to maximize as much as we can. That maximum probably is going to be somewhere in the range of 40 megawatts, just given the land area and the roof area. We're currently at 9 megawatts now. It could be 45, it could be 35. But the maximum we can do, we're going to try and do. But given the capacity factor of solar, and solar generates when the sun's out, obviously, right? But the capacity factor is roughly about 17% in our territory. Those are real numbers. And as a result, that'll generate at 40 megawatts about 60,000 megawatt hours. Our current wholesale purchases are just under 700,000. So, you know, we're less than 10% if we do everything we possibly can. We want to continue to do solar. It's good, but it doesn't get us to the 40%. Upper left-hand corner there, hydrogen for electricity generation. We're exploring that. I have mentioned to you guys earlier this year, we're trying to do a pilot project at Station 3 with an electrolyzer company, and then with a company that builds generators, builds engines. We've got one of their engines right now, Station 3, that runs on natural gas. The idea for us is to explore the hydrogen space, but it's still early in the process. In terms of you know, again, it's you know, whether it's 8 years or 12 years or 15 years down the road, we don't know, but we're going to keep exploring on that. And hopefully we get this pilot in place at Station 3. On the right-hand side there, low temperature geothermal. On a high temp basis, high temperature geothermal is proven technology. Has been around for a long time. The fundamental process technology for both high temp and low temperatures established. The issue is trying to establish low temperature geothermal, low temperature, which would work in our territory. We're not near any hot springs. But that's realistically 8+ years out. So we're going to continue to pursue that. We think that's an ideal scenario for a whole bunch of good reasons. But again, we're not the development engineers, we're the application guys. So then it leaves in the upper right-hand corner, carbon captured fuel cells. So this is the discussion that we started with the gentleman from Bloom, just again, trying to think out of the box. We'll walk through the technology here in a little bit more detail. It's an established technology as a fuel cell, and carbon capture is established technology, but we would be one of the early adopters in terms of putting those two together. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So today's discussion, we're not asking for any motion at this point in time. You guys know the strategy that we tend to do is, we try and run these in 3 blocks. The first discussion is, hey, here's what we're thinking about. Here's the reason why. Commentary discussion is welcome. And then a little more details, subsequent meeting, and then approval in a third meeting. So that's, again, the same basic piece. So we're trying to dig into this a little bit more aggressively. Part of the reason is that there are funding opportunities from the IRA 2022 on a federal level. There's grant opportunities. Those dollars will run out. Production. Anyways, we're trying to be early and fast in the process. So the early bird gets the worm, for lack of a better expression, and we can use it. So that's why we're trying to be aggressive as we can. All right. I'm going to, so that's context. Any question in terms of context before we talk about what carbon captured fuel cell is?
One quick question on the 40% in territory generation. That's equivalent to how many megawatts?
So baseload megawatts, let's see, I think we ran the numbers real quickly, Bill. I think that, so that's going to be somewhere around 50 megawatts. But Bill, you will confirm that for me. Yeah, that's why we got to 320 megawatt blocks.
That's a little over 50.
Yeah, 50 megawatts.
Okay. All right. So this could be potentially half that, half or more of that.
Oh yeah. So we're the 20. Yeah. So the 20. So the idea right now would get not quite half, but pretty close. Yeah. So 20 megawatt blocks works. And then again, obviously the other thing we need to do is fit that into our power supply portfolio, which, as you guys know, we do on a regular, all the time, constantly looking at it. All right, other questions? Okay. And so I think the takeaway here is, we want to keep moving forward. We feel like we need to take action now. Again, this is not meant to be concerning to our customers. They should view us as basically, hey, we're being proactive and trying to be ahead of the curve, not reactionary. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael. Michael, just a little bit of background on who Bloom is, and I'll talk about technology. But just kind of a big picture in terms of
Yeah, thank you. And feel free to interrupt along the way if you guys have questions. So Bloom is itself a technology provider, right? We sell fuel cells in the form of boxes. I know you said out of the box, but actually we sell boxes. So, and so we are a company that's been around for quite a while now. We originally were founded out of a spin out of NASA. So basically taking technology that was based on hydrogen. Our founder realized that there really wasn't a supply of hydrogen readily available. Otherwise, that probably is where we would have scaled. And instead, he pivoted the machine to go to work with natural gas. So we'll be talking about that a little bit today. But for the avoidance of doubt, that system at its core is actually a hydrogen-based system. We actually try to reform the methane to be able to be a hydrogen-based system. So we'll get into that a little bit more with the electrochemistry in a bit. But at a high level with the company, we've been around for quite a while, right? We're a decades-old company, publicly traded. We've got offices all over the world. Our 24/7 monitoring operations are both in San Jose and in Mumbai, India. We've got, although we've got these offices all over the world, all of our manufacturing is domestic. So we've got our actual stacked electrochemical cells in San Jose, and then we actually ship those over to Delaware, where we assemble them into the full boxes that you see actually up here in the upper right corner. In fact, that site, I believe, is our site in Delaware. As another example of a utility scale project. I think that one's 30 megawatts total. And it's somewhat similar to what we'd be talking about, although I think this is a little bit of an older design in the sense that you don't have the carbon capture attached to it, which is something that would kind of change the site layout a bit here. As you can see, we've got a huge backlog, lots of projects in the field. We've got a gigawatt of projects in the field, so it's 1,000 megawatts. We're talking about 20 here, so the relative scale, just to kind of put things in perspective. We've done a few projects, basically, is the summary of it all. And, we continue to do more of them. And it's mostly to address a lot of the points that, Greg talked about, where there's less stable utilities, especially in the United States, and customers having a hard time keeping their lights on, right? And so in those areas where you don't have quite as proactive leaders trying to make sure that the lights stay on, you've got customers that are basically saying, I'm going to have this on site to be able to power my load. So we have quite a bit of this throughout the United States. So I did study material science, and my previous chemistry professors are definitely going to criticize me if they ever see this video. But essentially, the system works off of oxygen and hydrogen. So starts out with natural gas, goes through a steam reformation process, separates into CO and hydrogen. Like I said, it reacts with oxygen to create water, CO2, and we've got a few other constituents that will basically be a function of the quality of the natural gas coming in. So it turns out where we've been looking at projects so far, the quality's been pretty robust, and so we think it'll actually be a very high pure CO2 stream, which is good for what we're talking about in the next stage, which is basically taking the exhaust of the system, which actually comes in two compartments. We've got a cathode, which is basically just air kind of coming back through the system, and then we've got our anode. And our anode is the one that's a more pure CO2 stream. So we'll basically create a flange on the back of the box instead of just venting into atmosphere, and then we'll run that flange into the system in a process that will clean and purify that CO2 to basically be a stream that can then be utilized in a bunch of different applications, which we'll kind of go over in the next slide. I do want to make one last touch here on this slide is that, these systems can be retrofit to be hydrogen ready at any point in time in the future. So although we're setting up the infrastructure with natural gas today, when the system is ready to convert over to hydrogen, we can do so with a simple retrofit.
One last key point. So we're going to talk in just a moment in that orange box in terms of what we do with the CO2. But part of it on this flow is it's going back into as a reclaim loop, a small part of the reclaim loop.
That's right. Actually, and that's an important observation here, right? So you have the natural gas come in, you have the fuel cell performing this electrochemical reaction, which again is non-combustion, which I think is a key differentiator for fuel cells. That exhaust is then captured, is processed, and then anything that's not kind of being consumed by the CO2 off-taker will then be looped back into our process loop, right? So there's going to be a little bit of hydrogen that comes out on the back end. There's going to be some other things, and we're going to pipe those back into our system to kind of try to boost our efficiency a little bit higher even than our standard product. So there's net benefits that kind of stack above and beyond just the use of the CO2 in the area. So, kind of just talked about this, at a high level earlier. You can see, capturing that fuel cell exhaust. And so you've basically got two products that come from this fuel cell, right? You've got the low carbon electricity, and then you've got the CO2, which actually in this case is a resource. So, anecdotally, as we start to talk to consumers of CO2 in the market, and actually the suppliers as well, it turns out there's no source of CO2 in the area. And so we're actually shipping and railing CO2 from other parts of the United States, creating more emissions beyond pulling it out of the ground to get it up here to be consumed. And that is used in things like pharmaceuticals and biomedical research, that's food and beverage. Many of the soft drinks that we're drinking tonight are, sourcing CO2 from places in the ground. And in the cases of actually manufacturing up in New England, they're transporting it up here, right? So we essentially would be trying to displace that source or those other sources around the United States. Small part of it, absolutely, yeah. It's a pretty big market, and importantly, we're getting a sense that it's going to continue to grow in a pretty significant way. So as more and more towns are adopting sustainable building material requirements, we're noticing that there's a huge demand and pull for sustainable blocks and bricks. And so we actually think that might be one of the biggest opportunities for us for this project in particular.
Before you go, so this is kind of a quick summary of the business model behind it. What we really want is the energy out of it, right, in territory generation. And this takes natural gas as a fuel source. And so the question is, what do we do with the carbon, right? Because our mission is reliable, low cost, and non-carbon. So that's what we're doing. And that's also, part of our compliance obligations. One of the things that as we start exploring this more and more, realizing that there's a market for it, this creates another business opportunity for the owners of this asset to generate another revenue stream in terms of selling the CO2. The other key piece of it, as we see it, is we're in the greater Boston area, we're on the northern side of the greater Boston area. So If we figure out a way to create a microcosm of interrelated businesses that all work together, us generating electricity, food and beverages, the pharmaceutical, the construction, taking the CO2 output, some of that stuff coming back into our customers as well. I think there's a good story from being responsible from an environmental perspective as well as a good economic perspective. So we'll talk about the CO2 here in a little more in more details in just a second. But I wanted to give you guys kind of a big picture of why we explore this more deeply than just simply say it's not worth exploring.
Go ahead. Question. Very exciting stuff. It starts with natural gas, just like a combined cycle natural gas power plant, which I think are 50 or 60% efficient at converting natural gas to electricity, correct? Like a combined cycle natural gas power plant. And then what is that number? And then what is the number for this?
We'll go to the next slide. You're going to talk about the next slide, right?
Yeah, we can.
Or no, okay.
What's the?
Well, it's going to address this issue.
Yeah, so why doesn't Michael, one thing is you want me to?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and then we'll get back to the efficiency, because the efficiency is key. But the thing I want to say before we talk about the specific metrics, efficiency tells you how much electricity you're getting out per unit of energy, how much gas goes in, and how much how much fuel goes in, how much electricity goes out. But in this configuration, whatever energy is produced, whatever the CO2 is that comes out, that is captured. So it's not, even if you're operating at a lower efficiency, you're capturing the same extremely high rate of the carbon. So the efficiency doesn't need more. Lower efficiency wouldn't need more emissions because we're capturing, we're talking about how much carbon we're capturing. But
I get that. I do understand what you're saying. I'm just still wondering. So leaving aside the carbon capture piece and the exciting potential to make bricks and soda pop out of it, what is the efficiency?
We'll typically, we'll typically warrant your system around 54%.
Okay, so it's about the same as the combined cycle.
So Dave, I think the key difference is the concentration of CO2 is much higher coming out of the fuel cell because you don't have a lot of excess air going into the fuel cell like you do in a combustion turbine.
Yeah, and to kind of expand upon that, the non-combustion nature means that we're avoiding a lot of the particulates that come out of the combined cycle system, as you can kind of see in this slide, right? So those two, or that middle little pair of lungs there focuses on NOx and SOx, which are obviously respiratory aggregated factors. So that's a big differentiator here as well. But from an efficiency perspective, to directly answer that question, is correct. 54% something that we're guaranteeing.
So in terms of
I think the point here is, I think it's got to do with the regulations also, right? There's a number. So is there a number associated with the gas combined cycle that these guys have to be better than?
Oh, I don't know if there was a regulation.
There was something. There was a number. There was like 50 something. There was a number 50.67 or something. Right, that document you sent around.
Yeah, and I think that document that ties to the ability to earn certificates.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we can talk about that, but I just want to make sure in terms of the units, I want to make sure that I just follow the discussion. When we talk about efficiency, the efficiency is what? The efficiency of what? The conversion of natural gas into electricity.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Into electricity. Okay. Good.
So do you mind if I just keep going?
Well, please.
And just the super high level for dummies. So it's taking natural gas, producing electricity at a rate of 54% of the energy in the natural gas becomes electricity, which is about the same as a combined cycle natural gas plant. I'm not being a skeptic.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand because I think a combined cycle is up around 60%, and those have scrubbers for the NOx and SOx.
So what you're saying is right.
Yeah.
Typically, when I think 60% is a little high for natural gas combined cycle plant. Typically, when you look at, real world data from the EPA that tracks the stuff for every power plant in the country, the numbers are closer to 50.
Got it.
And so even without the carbon capture equipment, the regular natural gas fuel cell just emits a little bit lower.
Okay.
And with the efficiency, when I say we warranty it at 54% typically, Michael mentioned earlier, we have these two 24/7 monitoring stations around the world, and computer screens, and they can monitor, something like 1 million data points on all our systems around the world. And what they're doing, one of the things they're doing is making sure that the cells are operating the way they want. And so because these are modular, when they see a certain cell, which is a tiny little component in one of these boxes, starts to degrade, you just send someone out and they swap it out, and that's part of the service contract. So we can adjust the efficiency, we can measure and kind of do what we need to do on the efficiency side from remote monitoring.
And then the advantage again though is also that since you're generating it in territory, there's not the transmission losses from the combined cycle plant in Everett or wherever, right? Yeah. So that's another benefit. So you get there's losses within the district, but not the transmission plus the costs that we're all paying. Of course, the big one.
Both items are valid. It's true.
Okay, so the last question, and then I'll stop. Are these high temperature solid off or low temperature?
High temperature.
So it's 1,000 degrees C, right? In there.
It's 800. Yeah.
So this is, and then the issue there is, that is proven over decades or many years that there's not degradation and expensive retrofits associated with 800 C operation inside the solid.
There is degradation in every system, just like an energy storage device, like a battery, right? That's built into our service performance contracts. So we take care of all that. I don't know what your energy storage contracts have looked like, but I know sometimes the industry has kind of that big blip of extra CapEx at like year 10 or something like that to kind of retrofit. This actually is a continuous process for us. We're constantly monitoring and updating the system as we need to. That cycle looks closer to 4 to 6 years, but it varies, and we kind of individually change out the boxes as we need to, right? And I think that's an important feature here when we talk about comparing ourselves to a combined cycle system is the modularity, both benefits in our ability to kind of be a smaller system that can be distributed generation within the network, but also it has very high availability, which is different from production, right? Like availability is uptime, where production is just megawatt hours coming out, and our availability is well above 99%. Like it's always on, and that's kind of like one of our big shticks when it comes to like the sales talk. Is like it's always on, right?
But the high level for us is essentially you're building a better mousetrap where the mousetrap is a natural gas sourced power plant. Just a better way to use natural gas with an incremental percentage gain in efficiency, local generation, and maybe a way to use the CO2.
I think on the front end, that's probably an accurate characterization.
Inaccurate.
I don't want to discount accurate. Although there's two things I do want to talk about in terms of the impact of the fuel cell itself. One is non-combustion impacts on local air pollution. And you mentioned there are NOx scrubbers, but they're not.
Correct. They're not that
they don't catch it all. Right. And so, we can talk about this slide, but, we'll reduce compared to like the New England grid, we'll reduce our emissions are virtually eliminating emissions of NOx and SOx from the fuel cell. And the other is talking about natural gas combined cycle. You're talking about water to make steam. Right. And these don't need water you fill it with a little bit of water, but it's a closed loop. And so once it's on, it operates with water. But that's all on the front end. That's the electricity generation. And as I said, we've been doing that for a while. The novel thing here, and the thing that meets the non-carbon requirement, and we can talk about how it meets the letter of the law under your obligations, is the carbon capture, which is once you've done this better form of electricity generation, you still have some carbon. You're capturing it, you're putting it in a box, and what do you do with it? And that's where it's really interesting. And if you're using it beneficially, then you have very, very low carbon power.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. So, Greg, I think the stability of the gas supply becomes an important thing because this is from a base load. Like the stability of the gas supply is important. And then the purity of the gas supply is also important because that's what the life of the cell depends on, right? It's like the purity of the gas and or the purity of the fuel, right? So the main question I have is, Google and others have been using these for a while, right? But how many people have been doing carbon capture with your systems? Do you have examples of people who does?
Yeah, so this is absolutely a new thing for Bloom from the sense that we haven't attached a carbon capture system.
So we'll be one of the first to.
So I can't publicly announce, Bloom's not public about this yet, but we are in the process of contracting with much bigger projects than this one that, I would say are ahead of this in the sales cycle within Bloom, right? So there are other groups that are ahead of you in this process, but there is nothing installed in the field yet. Basically what our strategy is, you're taking that base fuel cell that, again, we've got over a decade of experience with, we're engaging parties who have that same level of experience on the carbon capture end, and then we're bolting those two devices together. So although that bolt hasn't been done yet, there are other parties that are engaged with us that will be bolting those two items together. And so although you will be one of the earlier groups that, would be kind of moving forward.
Would it be the same scale or would it be bigger?
Theirs are bigger, but it's the same building block. This 20 megawatt block is actually intentional. It's our smallest copy paste for carbon capture, mostly because of the economies of scale. But they will be scaling up to the same idea.
Thank you.
Right, Pam?
So, I assume you've done pilot-sized tests of these, bolting these two things together. Is that right, or no?
No, so this is one of those things that you need a bit of scale to actually be able to install something. I mean, we do, in-lab testing and the actual design of the product. All those things are very rigorous, and because we're a more mature company, we have the luxury of having an in-lab full system that we can operate and kind of compare benchmark results and stuff like that to make sure there's no change in performance. But in terms of actually getting it out and putting those two technologies together, it really takes, this type of scale. And so, with the creation of the IRA and some of the other incentives that kind of make the financing work for this now, these are just starting to kind of come out of the scale.
Okay. And then for a system of the size we're talking about, give me a sense of how much carbon are we capturing here, and what is how much are you selling? What's a good use case for that amount of carbon?
Yeah. So this project would be using in the ballpark, or would be producing in the ballpark of 150 to 160 tons a day. Mm-hmm. And so that is a relatively small amount of the CO2 market today, especially when you look at the outlook of some of the growth of sustainable materials. So that's one of the things that we think is really important to this entire process. I'd love to have come to you today and say, this is the chosen vendor for the carbon capture, equipment that we're going to bolt on. But we actually think that they need to be a part of that dialogue and also help us make sure that those contracts are sufficient to make sure this is a reliable offtake. And so there's more to be done there, and it kind of goes above and beyond just that standard. You've proven yourself in the field, but you also need to help us contract it offtake as well.
Thank you.
I guess the last thing on the right-hand side, just because I really appreciate, one of the things that brought me to Bloom is the firm baseload ability of this technology and still being a relatively clean tool. So, I know that the screen's kind of blocked a little bit here, but it is, operating 95% of the time, which I think is important.
That's what we plan to run.
That's right. Yep. Firm baseload power.
Yeah. So we plan to run it for scale and efficiency, et cetera. We plan to run it roughly 8,300 out of 8,760 hours over the course of a year, which is different than the 99% availability that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
This is not a peaker unit by any stretch of the imagination. When we start this thing, we want to run it as long and as much as we can on any given period of time. The 5% would be for maintenance and the equipment, et cetera. That's an estimate is based on what we know right now, your current experience, correct?
Yeah. And even then, the rest of the site can still stay online. These are modular down to the box level. You will have the ability to open up one box, do the maintenance you need to do, and the rest of the site stays on. I know we've got some fun slides where at one site there was a GC who was building a site, and a backhoe kind of rolled down a hill and then fell into our system. And that one box shut down, but the rest of the site stayed online, which is a pretty cool anecdote and story I like to tell. So
that goes back to your reliability component as well.
Yeah.
And then again, just we're trying to, this is the initial education and things we're exploring, et cetera. So preliminary, obviously at the end of the day, reliable, low cost, non-carbon, and the low cost element talks to the economics. So for a 20 megawatt carbon capture fuel cell system, we don't have preliminary estimates. The whole package is going to be somewhere in excess of $100 million, right? And so part of the reason for us to be working on this now is there's opportunities for us to work together amongst all the participants to each contribute something. And so the intent here is not that RMLD is going to write a check for $120 million, but there'll be a lot of participants. That's one piece. Second piece, we need 4 acres of land. For this 2.5, 4 acres, about 4 acres. So you guys know from all the other discussions, we're in land acquisition mode. And then the third piece, back to your point, right? Reliable fuel supply, right? And that's a very important issue. The good news in our territory, there's a variety of natural gas systems, including transmission systems. So there's a question in terms of where we put it. The reason why the transmission systems are important. So we're one of 40 MLPs that operate, municipal light plants that operate inside of Massachusetts. One of the other ones has a firm gas contract that it wants to get rid of because the demand hasn't materialized. So that could be another, again, we have to get a little further down the road, but that is one of two potential sources in terms of relatively speaking, low cost and reliable natural gas. The other element that we're looking at from a natural gas perspective, the different forecasts, again, our focus is on electricity, but we look at the natural gas market now. The forecast is for load or demand for natural gas in New England to continue through the next 10 years roughly, and then start tapering down. And the tapering down is the further installation of air source heat pumps for primarily natural gas heating systems, and then secondarily, there are continually scheduled retirements of traditional combined cycle natural gas facilities in the region, which goes back to the fundamental goal of why we're trying to do stuff within our territory at proper scales. Anyways, fuel's a critical issue. The good news is that some of the sites that we're looking at, potential sites, ones that we actually have control of, and other ones that we're gaining control of natural gas nearby. So it's all part of the puzzle, but those are critical pieces. Financing is going to be real important. We talked about ITC, investment tax credits, discounts on equipment, bonds, grants, and of course, cash at the end of the day. This isn't a final buttoned-up proposal, but it is novel enough that we wanted to keep you guys abreast of the creativity that we're thinking about, and solicit your input on it. And then I'll talk about the economics here at the very end. Go ahead, Vivek.
So from a timing point of view, did you say you're trying to do this by 25, 26? Or?
Yeah, next 2.5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so you have to sort through all of these things.
Well, we got a lot of work to do in the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we started our dialogue, I think, in the June timeframe, May-June timeframe. So, there was initial discussions and skepticism, et cetera. But, the things we looked at, first and foremost, carbon capture, right? The next thing was, what are the operating costs? And then the next thing behind that is, what's the capital investment, et cetera. So it's not fully baked yet, but we think there's enough, it's credible enough that we're going to continue pushing on it. I have up there in the upper right-hand corner, roughly $100 a megawatt hour net cost. As a reference point, our energy costs right now are roughly $42, $43 just for energy only. But we have on top of that transmission and capacity costs. So the reality is this is pretty close to what our wholesale costs are today, right? And then we'll have to put into the models. Unlike where we are with the solar project, the Maple Meadow project, we're in the range of somewhere between $50 and $80 a megawatt hour, right? We would do as many solars as we possibly could, but there's only so much land and so much sun. The assumption on that is, as we talked about before, 8,300 run hours. So this is a base load system. It's got to fit into our load, which it does, at a 20 megawatt system. All the work that Bill's team's working on in terms of load forecast that we talked about before. And then obviously our power supply portfolio, it fits in the right time frame. But also if we're doing small blocks, we can provide flexibility. So we are taking the reliability seriously in terms of what's going on in the market around us. And obviously, as we talked about before, our storage system is another component of that piece. So that's the big picture. At the end of the day, we have more questions. Go ahead.
So when you're talking about 4 acres of land, so that original picture you showed us of all those blocks, that'd be 4 acres of those blocks in order to generate this?
Yeah, I think this site would, that 4 acres would also include the carbon capture equipment on it as well.
So like say Ballardville, when you're looking at a substation, how much land is there? Is that 4 acres of land there? So that could be.
That's 3.4 acres. Close.
Yeah.
And part of the 4 acres, there's the equipment, which probably is going to be less than 2 acres roughly, and the rest of it's going to be setbacks for equipment, turnarounds for whatever sort of trucks we use. So just access to the land itself. The footprint's going to be much smaller, but yes, 326 Ballardvale is a very viable site. extremely viable site. So that's one of the ones that we would think about. And then we're, I think as we had talked about before, I believe we kind of laid this out, is that the big picture is that we envision 420 megawatt blocks, southern part of Reading, center part of Linfield, western part of Maple Meadows, like Wilmington, and then this North Reading, Wilmington, Route 125 Ballard area. And part of the reason for doing a design like that from a reliability perspective is we've got distributed energy within our territory in case something happens, I don't know, 93 disappears or whatever the issue might be. So just, again, we're trying to design a reliable system that is hardened to make sure that we provide electricity, because obviously as we get more and more electricity dependent, pressure is going to be, I mean, our charter right now is reliable, low cost, not carbon, but that threshold is increasing as more and more of the energy requirements of our customers become electricity. So that's the big picture in terms of how that might all work. But 326 could work. And that gets into the, all the moving pieces around, okay, but that goes there, then where do we put the substation close to 125, and what do we do with the 16 acre? And so there's all that. We're trying to move all those pieces around and they're all together, but we're trying to keep all of these moving forward.
And the generation and these boxes have to be at the same site. They couldn't be like generations down here and another 2 acres down the street. It's where you're at, all right?
Yeah, so you generally want to have the carbon capture equipment co-located with the boxes, just that way you're not running, the pipes of the exhaust down the street. But obviously we can get creative. And one of the best parts about the fact that they're boxes is you can do L shapes, you can do S's, like you can work around wetlands if you want to, right? It's obviously way more space efficient if you just jam it into a square, but this is New England, the sites are going to be complicated, right? As you mentioned earlier, I have a ton of background in solar, and so I definitely looked through a lot of those details when I was looking at the first sites.
All right, so Barney, any other questions? We just want to give you guys an update. We're going to continue. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
One more question, just the anticipated timing of next conversation.
Realistically, if not November, it'll be December. Yeah, we're trying to move quickly. We got a bunch of things running and time kills deals, so keep them moving. And if you're not going to do them, then get them off the train.
I see Bill smiling over there.
All right, very good. We'll jump to the next topic. Thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
By the way, compliments on the camera system. That's pretty top-notch stuff.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Gentlemen,
You have 3 other pages in this presentation after this thing. Any relevance to those pages?
no, they were back up relative to that. Was one of them was talking about the calculation and the for the carbon capture piece. They're all relative. If we want to get into more details, so
Okay.
we might talk about them in more detail later.
Next thing you got is the rates.
Yes.
They're going down? They're going down?
Yeah.
No.
Swing and a miss.
Yeah. Well, they're not going out as much as we thought they meant. And more importantly, last year, actually, bills went up much less than we forecasted to be. Good news.
Is this the silver lining?
Yeah, it's come and gone. Remember those silver shovels that you guys use? Yeah.
Spray paint?
Yeah, spray painted.
Okay. Go ahead. So I want to present on the proposed rates for 2024 that will be effective. We're proposing for March 2024. So what I'll present is the goals and objectives of our rate making efforts. Give you the context of what's driving some of the pricing, and give you the summary of the proposed changes, as well as giving you the impacts on a typical deal with rate examples. So in the rate making world, our goal and objective is to design the rates to cover our costs of providing service. We want to allocate those costs fairly and based on the specific characteristics of the rate classes, like industrial users, caregiver bias, and residential users. We also need to provide the funds for efficiency and electrification initiatives. We want to offer customers better understanding of control of energy use by doing time of use rates and coincident peak rates like we presented I think 2 meetings ago. And then, of course, we need to comply with the BPU and all of the statutory and internal RMLD policies that have been set by the chair of the picture. So the process we go through, we clarify the outcomes and the behaviors that we expect from customers. We then forecast the loads. So we're looking at the load drives everything that we do. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're not. It's hard to predict the weather. And then we set the retail sales by class of customers. We look at the base costs of providing the service and then what the power supply is going to cost based on the market forces that we're expecting and the view of the time we set the rates. And then we review each of the cost drivers by the rate class. We allocate those costs across the rate classes to see what the total spend is. And then we refine allocations as we need to in order to make sure that we're allocating the cost technically across the customer base. And then we update the specific rates to that. And you can see in 2024, if we look at the expenses, certificates comprise 5% of the cost structure. The capacity costs paid into the ISO New England market are 15%. Transmission is up to 20%. Energy is expected to be 31%. And then the other operating costs of just, running utility are 29% of our cost structure.
Hold on, Bill.
So just a quick question. Just please remind, why do certificates cost us? I mean, I know capacity.
Yeah, so more of a 25, 26 number in terms of that 5%. So right now it's basically net neutral in terms of what we retire versus what we sell. So that title there should be probably 2025 headlines for 2023.
Because right now we're making money on certificates, right?
Yeah.
So we make money on certificates, so that's not an expense.
No, we don't make money on certificates. We buy them and then we sell them for pretty much what we buy them for. I mean, so
in a sense, we don't retire them. We're not retired. We don't retire all of them.
Yeah,
so you make a.
We do retire some of them.
Yeah. So we have to look at each individual transaction for that. But with all the certificates that we purchase, we don't purchase anything on the open market, right? You know that everything's associated. And so for roughly about 60% of our energy, we purchase certificates associated with that power. And we retire this year, we're retiring 29% of them, so roughly half. The other ones we sell, but we have already purchased them. So we are purchasing them as part of, you can figure out whatever assumption you want to make in terms of power, et cetera, but we actually bought them for somewhere between $30 and $40 a certificate. And we're selling them for somewhere between $30 and $40 per certificate. So it's not a profit center. It's recovered cost. That's the way you want to think about it.
So this is like a broker fee that you pay for the certificates?
Yeah.
No,
that number should,
this 5%, it's like a transaction fee?
The broker fee is not even a half or a couple tenths of a percent. We don't broker.
So what makes up the 5%?
Yeah.
So the headline of that title of that particular category should be 20, because when we get 2 years down the road, it's going to end up the net cost is going to be on the positive side. Right now it's net neutral. 60%. So that number should be closer to zero for this staff bar chart.
So why is it 5% up there?
It's an error on the slide. The title of the slide should be 2026. So,
Explain that again. You lost. You lost.
That headline should be 2026 estimate, not 2024.
So it should say 2026 expenses.
So the 2026 expenses is that will be our net cost of certificates. Our net cost of certificates will be in the range of 4 to 5%, in addition to fuel. Right now, everything goes to the fuel budget. I'll walk you through. So we'll put together our cash flow for that.
I don't get it.
Well, actually, we're going to talk about this in December. So we're going to talk about our certificate strategy in December. back to Marlene's point.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to get clarity on this
Yeah.
because.
So in other words, I'm going to ignore that column.
Ignore the column, everything else stays fine. So I think, don't ignore the column, because I think the core piece is operating costs are roughly about 30%, a third, energy is about a third, and capacity and transmission are a third. So that's very important context for our rate structure and also for our subsequent operating. Okay. Good.
Thank you. So we expect, based on the current projected cost structures, that we'll need to have an 8.4% across the board, average rate increase. And that's over the 2023 monthly bills. As it turns out, there are two key variables to the energy costs of any customer, and that's obviously how much they use in any given month, and then what the power supply costs are in that month. So for 2024, we're projecting the fuel costs, the power costs are going to be 5.2% higher than the actual costs in 2023. And the transmission costs are really increasing. And this strikes to the heart of why we're trying to pursue as much in-territory generation as we can, so we can start to reduce that transmission cost and head off some of the increases that we're seeing. So we're seeing a 14% increase cost.
Is that from ISO network?
Yes. Yeah, so that's, we're connected both to Eversource and National Grid. So we pay to both of those IOUs for use of their transmission systems. And they charge us each month based on the peak usage we have that coincides with their system peaks. So we don't always know when that's going to be, and it's not always the same as ISO New England peak. But we try to predict that and then run our dispatchable battery generator during the time to reduce that cost. But if we have in-territory baseload generation, that will offset that transmission cost by however much we have that baseload in-territory generation running. And that's why, it was good to be preceded by the Blue project, because that would, whatever megawatts we put in, if we put in a Blue fuel cell, if we put in a 20 megawatt, that will reduce our system load by 20 megawatts during the peaks, and that savings will go directly to the bottom line. So the actual bills will reflect the actual monthly usage and the pass-through of the power supply costs. And as you can see, we expect to continue to be significantly below the investor utility. Yes.
You guys have a budget.
Is that 8.4% solely due to the expected power supply costs, or is there?
No,
Those operating cost increases.
Okay, because I don't see my economics.
yeah, we can.
We'll walk you through, so walk you through the detailed pieces of the tech.
All right.
Yeah, this gives a breakdown of the customer usage. So the 2023 current column, these are the estimated average bill for these users. So for residential, most of our customers, and we have 27,000 customers on the residential A rate. So the average usage is about 812 kilowatts. That monthly cost will go from $148 to $159. It is a 7.6% change. We're not allocating as much to the residential customers as we are to the other class of customers. For the sake of equity, I think the residential customers have borne some of the cost increases of previous rate increases. So we're trying to balance it out a bit so that they're not, burdening. We're not burdening most of the residential customers with that cost increase. But this gives you so each rate class has its own percentage. We try to keep everyone under 10%, with the idea that we would have the least increase for the residential customers.
Marlene, go ahead.
Thanks. So why will the time of use go up 10%, but But the regular residential only allowed 7 points.
Well, the time of use rate, as you can see, is significantly lower.
Basis.
The base is lower.
Right.
And it still remains significantly lower. So it's still attractive to people to go onto the time of use rate.
Okay.
And it does take more management of that. You know, there's more investment needed to support the time of use rate because we need to.
All right. And it's not a big dollar amount.
It's
We looked at the dollars.
$1 more.
Calculated the,
You know.
Okay. And
incremental
I
dollar.
know if Karen were here, she'd say,
She is here.
I don't want to, I know she is not here. Is this too early to mention, or maybe comes up later? Is this where the rate stabilization fund is not a player and you have to address this later because it sounds like it would be?
Well.
The name rate stabilization fund sounds like this is something that I know we've covered it before.
Yeah, in the context of, when we talk about the capital budget, et cetera, we look at, and what we talked about before, the answer to the question is no, the bottom line, but the logic behind it is the wholesale market is becoming much more volatile in terms of pricing. And in fact, we've started to see some of that already this year, even though it's been a mild summer. We had $1 million swings in our July and August, or June and July power supply costs, which average about 5 million. So not trivial numbers. Used to be, a couple 100,000. So part of the goal of that, I'm talking about the fuel, so forgive me. That's the fuel. But rate stabilization, we intend that to be literally the rainy day fund in case, I think the example used before last year, Shepherd goes out, or one of the wind farm, a big chunk of one of our pieces goes away and we have to buy in the wholesale market. That's where we look at it as being rate stabilization, not so much to adjust, because these numbers are basically accommodating our operating cost changes and the best forecast we have in terms of where fuel and capacity and transmission are going to be. So we want to, hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, let's go Vivek and then.
Just a comment on, I think the trade-off here is we're going to be spending a lot on CapEx. And so it's a balance, right? So you need some of that excess money generated too. So there is, you're going to be pushing 8% return, right? You're getting an 8% return, and then you're going to use some of that to support the CapEx.
Okay.
So, and the CapEx, so that has to be justified.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear, my first time through this, that what we're talking about here. When we talk about the 8.4% increase, that is going to be the rates for the customers, or are we saying this is the projected rate based on these assumptions, and then some actual costs may adjust your rate?
So to answer your question, the actual pass-through cost may adjust your rate. Why don't you go to slide 8 from one. So for that, exactly. So this is perfect residential aid. So our rates, our rate structure is what we call unbundled, and it's somewhat complicated for everybody. So if you look at the top block, the customer charge, the distribution energy charge, and the distribution demand charge. Now those are, if you look across all the different rate classes, all of these on the left-hand column are the same, but not all apply to every rate class. But the first three, customer charge, distribution energy charge, and distribution demand charge, those are rates, those are the fixed rates that we'll be deciding upon now that will carry through. And those each month will be multiplied whatever the actual KWH's consumption is by customers, and that'll create whatever in case this is proposed. So the other, if you go down the next three, there's fuel adjustment, there's NIPA credit, and there's capacity and transmission. Now the NIPA credit is a credit that applies only to residential customers, and that's done on a state organized contract 25 years ago. Doesn't apply to other rate classes except the residential, the A and the A2. The fuel and the capacity and transmission, and particularly the fuel, that is a number that we look at every month from a couple of variables. And the variables that we look at are what are the actual cost of energy that we had that we are incurring in the previous month. And since the bills go out after the fact, we're basically trying to spread across 3 months. And so those we will adjust, and so that rate does go up, and it doesn't vary a lot, and the history is on the website, et cetera. We try and dampen that because, as you can see, out of the total bill of 158, fuel is 41. So it's, a little over 25%. So if it goes up and down a lot, it's the driver, it's the rate component driver of it. The real key driver is what the kilowatt hour usage is, which changes every month. And it's all driven by weather. And the weather then drives, primarily HVAC loads, whether it's heating or cooling. So hopefully you get a sense that those are the key drivers. And then, of course, we always have a prompt payment discount, and that applies. Well, let me say one other thing before I say that. Fuel and capacity transmission are by design pass-through. So we don't mark them up, right? So our costs are and so the reason why that varies a little bit, because the wholesale cost changed on the portion that's on the open market and the volume. So there's a lot of variability. So we try and use that, and we have a fuel reserve fund, which basically allows us to dampen that. Because those are passed through with no markup, there's no discount tied to them, because then we'd be artificially subsidizing. We have to find it somewhere else, because all the dollars we have to work with come from the ratepayers. Except in the today's world now, there's grants and we have no debt, but eventually we might have some debt, et cetera. And obviously higher tax credits and all that kind of stuff going forward. But historically, the only source of funds are literally comes off these sheets. So those top 3 with the stars on them, in fact, those stars are what you'll see on your bills, any RMLD bills, those are basically open to the prompt payment discount. And so that's calculated for our budget.
Okay, Karen's up next. Go ahead, Karen. And then I'll go to Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did just want to, I heard Vivek's comment about the need to invest in capital, and nobody can argue with that in this situation. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to let you know that it would have been great if this had been done a number of years ago when the rates were lower, but I imagine bond rates are still less than 7.5%. So you absolutely can borrow using the AAA bond rating of the town, and that just requires, working with our town accountant and our treasurer, and then schedule it to come before town meeting. So that's generally April and November. Okay. So, so I would hate to say that the only way that we get these investments done are by passing on all of the costs. And you may see a better way if it's the substation you guys have been talking about, if it's a 50-year substation, I've always seen that then that's something that you finance. Thanks. That's it. I have to jump off. I have a competing finance committee meeting, but thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis, you had a question?
Can you go back one slide? So you talked about an 8.4% increase.
Average.
Right?
Yeah. So
if I take the percent change, add all that up, and then divide it by the 6, I get 9.2%.
Yeah, it's the weighted average based on the usage of each of those customer classes.
Okay.
So what we ultimately did to get the 8.4 is we took from the income statement, we took our kilowatt hour sales and our total revenues and divided that way. We're always consistent. Because trying to do the weighted average across all the rate classes becomes somewhat convoluted. And that 8.4% is to give you an order of magnitude. The fact that it's 0.4%, two significant digits. Nobody's bill is, there might be one customer out of the 31,000 that's going to be exactly 8.4 because there's so many variables.
So now I'm working on budgets for the town right now for our department. So the municipality, I'm looking at a 9.9% increase in my
budget, 10%.
And school should do the 8.7.
So, my thing concern is you talk about the 8.4%, but I look at those numbers, people are going to say this is a 10% increase, period. This is exactly what this says. This is a 10% increase. I mean, is there any stabilization fund that we could use to cut these numbers down? These numbers are just, too high.
Well, I think you might want to look at them in terms of the dollar change per month, right? And I think the other thing,
reality is they're going to look at that. It's a 10% increase. That's reality. Nobody's going. I hear weighted average. That's all wonderful stuff, but they're going to see 10%.
So if you look at the right-hand side, the two right-hand columns, and the previous slide, the stacked bar, our total cost to deliver power is low. And we can talk about the percent change, but on a dollar, on an average monthly bill, or where we fit in. So every quarter we get a summary of where we fit relative to the local municipalities and IOUs. We are in the middle of the MLPs, and we are literally half the IOUs. The reason why we're at these numbers are to generate the capital to allow us to do the investment to support the growth that's in front of us.
But then
And while we can certainly cut things, Phil, at the end of the day, the working assumption is the legislation is driving the electrification, and we've done the analysis in terms of what the growth is and what we need. We can certainly try and wait, but the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to be.
Right, but then to go on Karen's point, I mean, we could actually bond some of those things.
Yeah, but the bonds get paid by.
But has the analysis been done, which way is the least impact rates? Bonding a large part of the substation versus raising depreciation from 3% to 5%? Like, there's other options than just raising the rates that do go back into the rates, but yeah, how do those three options compare to each other? Which one is the least impact of the rates? Also back to the stack bar, it's great that we're half the price of IOUs, but we are in fact a municipal light plant. It would be nice. I know you have the chart there. Yeah, having that in here would have been nice to see where we are. So that is what Reading is. Yeah, I mean, we're not an island. We don't have like 90% in the day-to-day market.
Do we have that in our?
We have small.
Yeah, you don't have that in your package, yeah. We'll have to package that differently because that's not general publication, but we'll put that together for you. I think, Jason, the other thing going back to the 5 versus 3, because we spent a lot of time on that. That was a very good suggestion. And in fact, we're going to look at that going forward. But what that allows us to do by moving it from a 3% to a 5% depreciation is allow us to move that 8% threshold that we're supposed to be at. It basically allows us to charge a higher rate. So when we talk about depreciation is not cash, it's cash already spent. And all that mechanism, and it's a good mechanism, right? And it fits certain situations, but that basically, by doing that, it would give us the headroom to allow us to raise rates higher and still be below the 8%. That's where that comes in. Because at the end of the day, we would have a higher depreciation charge. So we can move the revenue higher to offset that depreciation charge and still have the net income be at 8% or less. So to answer your question, yes, we looked at that. And that it doesn't change at the end of the day the cost. Our view on the relative cost to bond, we want to delay bonding as long as we possibly can, because whatever AAA rate we get, whether it's 3, 4, 5, or 7%, it is still an incremental cost that we as the ratepayers all have to pay. So we're trying to minimize that as long as we can to get still set the stage that we have cash to build the infrastructure for the business we need to build.
Even if it's like 7%, it's only on the value of the bar. It's going to be less than the 8 or 9 or 10% on the local rates, right? I mean,
So if you look at it from a system perspective, that interest that gets paid is not in the current rate structure. And the only place that we're going to get revenue to pay the bonds is going to be from the rates. So that incremental 7% cost, even if it's only on 10 out of $100 million, that is still going to be an incremental cost that get passed on to the customers.
Right, but how does that compare to this? I mean, that's less. I guess that's
so when we bond is going to increase our cost, just flat out. It will.
Right, but you're going to spread that over a period of time. It's not going to be one down.
You're absolutely right, Phil. But at the end of the day, it's still an incremental cost. Right? I mean, it just, this, right? It's an
what is it?
Cost.
Like, I mean, the analysis that shows this is the cost prudent way to go.
This is the lowest cost. I mean, by definition, I can run any number you want, but if I add additional cost to it, it's going to push this out. And the additional cost will be the interest on the bond. Bond only shifts the expense down and gives somebody else additional dollars that we'd rather not spend on anything other than what to give our ratepayers. Bottom line. Go ahead.
Sam, I want to let you finish first if you were. Okay. Overall, although I think Karen was right that a couple of years ago, we would have had some cheap money. I don't know if you can actually, though, take the bond and then sit on the money for a period of time, but you have to use it.
You can't leverage it. Yeah.
You can't just have the money sitting there for 5 years. So
Right, you can't leverage it.
we could have done that, but yeah, now that it's 7%, I tend to, agree that not having a 7% interest paying on money is better than having it. But the question I had is completely different than that, which is maybe just explain for the people in the cheap seats and me, remind us all why residents pay 50% more than industry.
Oh, you want to first get on that?
Okay. It's basically economies of scale. So we have 4,300 industrial customers, and their average use is 83,000 kilowatt hours. And we have 27,000 residential customers, and each of them uses about a tenth of what the industrial customers do. So it just takes one transformer, one line to the customer, one bill. So there's a lot less infrastructure.
Is that 50% more expensive for residents?
Yeah, so we did a detailed cost analysis as part of our 2021 rate study that went into that level of detail. And so every 3 years we do a more detailed piece. And so that is where we ended up in terms of the net cost. So these two, last year and this year's adjustments, we used to be on a mode where we would do formal rate studies every 3 years. That world has changed. But to answer your question, whether it's 52 or 49, I couldn't say that with a.
But it's in that ballpark of 50%. Yeah. The overhead is 50% for residents.
That last time they did it a couple of years ago, the residents were being subsidized by the commercial.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's a shift to try to make it back to less, or not quite zero, because it's not feasible.
Yeah.
But it was shifted back into the residents.
Jason's right.
Yeah, so it's basically the distribution charge that's higher for the residential.
It's the primary piece.
Yeah.
We make adjustments.
The energy costs are the same, right?
Exactly right.
So is the distribution and the customer handling, right? So whatever.
It is primarily distribution costs, which the majority of our plant is poles, wires, transformers currently, and that's the distribution of it.
So you pay for what you use. So you're using one.
It's always pay for what you use. Everything's paid in kilowatt hours, with the exception of the customer charge. But that's 2 digits.
So,
Go ahead, Pam.
so I want to make sure I kind of try to think about things in terms of controllable and uncontrollable costs, right? So if I look at the power supply costs that you listed out in the bar chart that we won't look at because I have the wrong year number, but I think it's really helpful to look at. There's about 50% of that cost in there that current short term isn't controllable. Long term, as we think about like in network transmission, generation.
67% this year, but keep going.
Okay, so then you look at your projections that you have on page 4, which said, your energy, your fuel is going to go up 5.2, your transmission is going to go up 14.3. If you just kind of put those two pieces together, it's about a 4.5% increase in stuff that you kind of set in stone. You're really not, you're not able to really control that in the short term. Right. So it's about a little less than 4% is what you could really control if you think about your operating costs.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. At the end of the day, the customers think about what my monthly bill.
Totally understand. I just think if we're trying to think about like where can we influence, right? What we can influence potentially is less than half of the rate increase that you're talking, maybe a third of it.
That's a third, yeah.
Right. So what are the biggest drivers of that?
Labor.
Okay.
Labor is 10% of the cost structure. We'll get into that in the income statement. So yeah, so labor is the biggest driver.
Great, salary increases or
everything. We are a unionized environment.
Right. So contractually required increases, healthcare costs, those types of things. Okay.
We've also increased the electrification fund. We just rolled out a weatherization program, so we had to fund that as well.
Yes, we went from 0.3% to 0.4%. It's not a big number,
but it's still.
We're trying again. What's become very clear is that customers are appreciative and excited about our rebate and incentive programs. And weatherization is one, put our toe in the water back in the time frame. we've linked it to heat pumps for now. And for discussion, we had back in January of earlier this year before you were here. But, just because those are the customers paying into the customer.
And then one other question.
Sure, go ahead.
On page 5, the one's right after this, looking at the different rates. I look at this as a residential payer and I go, oh, how do I get that time of use rate? Because actually that's a 8% decrease in my rate, right? So how do we, not change the topic, but how do we communicate as part of this rate increase that, hey, you have an opportunity to actually offset that by mitigating savings?
Yeah. And we do have that conversation with customers if they call in and, they talk about their electric bill. So we do make them aware of the time of use rate that would reduce their costs.
Is there opportunity for us to do more?
There's opportunity to do more. However, there's a limit in terms of the amount of our current metering infrastructure that can handle time of use.
Okay.
So we as an organization think that time of use it should be a big part of the mix, but we're not going to be able to make that too big until we have the new metering infrastructure in place, which we'll talk about in a few minutes on the capital budget. So that's probably 3 years down the road. And at that point in time, we'll make a massive push. But if somebody wants to do it now, we have enough bandwidth and the infrastructure to allow more people to adopt.
What kind of adoption rate would we support now?
Dave and I had this discussion last January. So it's less than 5 to 7%. It's a small number out of it's mainly on the resident. So the commercial industrials have those time of use configuration. In fact, the industrial is only a time of use rate, and the commercial is a non-time of use rate. And so there's not, it's part of the factor in terms of the size of the load, et cetera. But the almost 28,000 residential meters, it's less than 1,000 that are currently time of use. And so our bandwidth, we can probably do somewhere in the range of 2,000 roughly. So if somebody wants to participate, and we'll run the analysis for them, because most people are concerned, hey, will I really save money or not? Because it depends upon their use pattern. And so actually on the website, we have a little tool that you have to input some basic stuff in your bill, and it'll give you an estimate of what it looks like. And then if you want to talk more, part of Bill's team actually will take a call and do a more detailed analysis. So we want to encourage it, but not blast it.
So I actually called to ask about it. And for my load profile, I was told that it's not appropriate for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so it depends on how you're going to use it.
Good, Jason.
Is that a blend? That's going to be a blended, right? Because time of use is 2 different rates for off and down.
Yeah, it's blended. Oh, yeah. That's exactly the point. Yeah. So there's 2 different rate schedules and the time of use for the residential. So that it is absolutely a blended rate.
So they have both rates going up the same amount. That would basically break to 9.9%, or is it?
I think I'm pretty sure. I don't remember the details of it, but we didn't purposely unbalance the 2 pieces. I go back to
It'll probably increase the same amount, so that the difference kind of looks the same.
It stays the same, yeah. We didn't purposely try and make that secondary level change.
So,
go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, we talked about rate increases the last year, right, last January. Whenever you put these numbers together, no one wants to see a 7.6, a 4.3, a 9.2. You got to get it to a realistic number. You're going to get a 5% rate increase. You're going to get a 6% rate increase. The number is mathematical, but it's not logical. So, in my opinion, I just think that if I'm going to get a rate increase, tell me it's going to be 5%.
8, 10, 10, 9.
Yeah. Okay. So that's
back to Phil's point.
Okay. So, but then we get back into the 8% in fuel being the pass through, being the majority of the driver here.
Which will be a variable.
It's a variable. We went high and then we had to retract.
Yeah,
that's a big number, 8%. That's a big jump. And I know we're going to we have to start laddering up because of infrastructure build. But it's to say, we had a very long discussion and we went back and we did not have the increase that we thought we were going to have. So
Because fuel didn't materialize.
well, it's pretty stable right now, and I don't think it's going to go through the roof. And we're making an estimation that it's going to go up, and that might not happen.
Agreed.
So let's react when we need to react.
Oh.
And I just I just don't like larger increases. Our selling point is we're not an MOU. I mean, IOU, right? But at low rates it's what people love about this place. We are going to go up, but let's target 5. Let's not target 8.
And on Bob's point, what's the percent change due to the change of the distribution energy and the customer customer charge? So when does that go wrong? And that's like the story, because that's what you can control what you're changing. And
Yeah,
that's
so this gives you the
3.5% increase on the customer charge on the overall bill. I guess that
so it's $1.46
out of 11.26. So that's 10%.
Yeah.
That's what those. But two things. One, so back to your point, we actually have it's a $4 million increase. We go from 29 million to 33 million on a fuel charge. So we're our best estimate in terms of what fuel. Now that might not materialize. Yeah. Remember back in December and January of last year, we did it in November. We had 3 different rate discussions last year, right? And what we ended up not doing, so we left the customer charge and the distribution demand and the energy the same. The net customer bills ended up being 4% higher in 2023 relative to 2022. So it's going to work out to be roughly that number. Roughly.
Well, then let's not say 8. Let's say that.
But and we could do that, but we're trying to make sure that we're consistent. That these numbers have to be consistent with the forecasted income statement, which is the operating budget, and that has the 4 million in it, and that might not materialize. I hear exactly what you're saying, and the reality is the customer bill probably is not going to go up 8 or 10% this year. It'll probably be closer to 5 for all the reasons you mentioned. Yeah, but we have to be a conservative budget, and the budget needs to match the rates.
Well, that's a risk orientation that what we have cash surplus to absorb, right? So that's the I think my opinion, we work on the conservative approach. We look at 5. You say 5%. It is going to go up. It's going to start climbing every year. But we don't need to talk about 10% rate increases. We talked about that a year ago. Let's not do that again. Let's take smaller steps. Let's go up take a small step. If we have to adjust it, then we adjust it again. But I just don't like going at 10% rating. I know it's 8 or 6, 7.8.
And I think. At the end of the day, right, the mission, reliable, low cost, low cost, right behind reliable. Lights on, don't charge too much. Yeah, with you. We're becoming increasingly efficient. We're looking for other sources. So we're trying to be very creative in terms of keeping those rates low. In a world, as we've talked about before, transformer costs, which are a big piece of our capital structure, are 3 times what they were. So, there's a give on everything. We worked with a lot of trade-offs in terms of setting the rates, setting the budget, et cetera, not to be too crazy, yet to give the flexibility, to your point, give the flexibility to handle the costs and the infrastructure that we're charged with building to handle the load that we forecasted. And, question.
If we were in the inflationary environment of 3 years ago, what would you think the rate increases you'd be proposing might be? If you backed out the current inflationary, is there a way for you to ballpark or better than a ballpark?
3%?
Say again?
4%? 3-4%. To back it out? Yeah. I think that's actually one of the right ballpark.
So, in other words, this is a rate increase the magnitude of what Bob is describing, plus the fact that inflation is driving higher. Is that a fair statement?
It's a very, well, that was a transformer example. Yeah, so I mean, it's not just transformers, actually.
Let's go to Pam first. And
But I mean, I just want to just get that point.
okay.
Is that a fair assessment? So like if we didn't have inflation, we would be seeing a 4% rate increase.
Closer to.
Okay.
Pam, and then back to Bob.
Kind of along the same lines, I'm curious, what were the rate increases over the last few years? And then this chart also that shows our rates versus IOUs. What would that look like if we compared it to other MLPs?
Other MLPs will be right in the middle. So other MLPs, 750 kW range from Hudson at $100 to Princeton, Belmont at $175, and we're at 130. Real data, real analysis.
Currently,
Last fall.
last one. Okay.
I mean, summer,
It's
2 months ago.
they're seeing similar increases. So the 159 that's on that page is their number is going to go up.
So 159 is probably higher. Again, that's an average customer bill.
Okay.
Right. And, the numbers I just gave you were for 750 rather than 820 because they run their analysis on 750 kWh.
Okay.
All right. So that's where that difference, but what I was trying to give you an idea of where we fit. We're on the, we're the third and a half of the other MLPs, back to Jason's point. I hear the percentage. I'm with you 1,000%, but at the end of the day, what's a monthly bill look like and what's it really going to be? I can't tell you what it's really going to be because fuel, back to your point, 70%, roughly 66.52 in the budget, but that number changes. It's going to be different. And at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is educate the customers, but also, as we look at that fuel adjustment, is try and dampen the ups and downs. And that's part of the reason why last year and this year, as opposed to the previous year, we're doing the rate adjustments in March. And the reason why March is important is that January in particular is a high kilowatt hour rate. So when you put a rate adjustment on whatever works out to be 10% on top of a load increase of 15%, now my bill is $240 instead of $130. And everybody says, what the heck out? So we did that wrong 2 years ago because we've come out of to answer your question, we've come out of a decade literally of flat load growth, flat load growth, flat cost. 2009 to 2020, just flat. 2017, 2018, that time frame did a 15% rate increase, and then we didn't do another one until 2020. Right, and that partially that 15% rate increase was to put dollars in the bucket for the substation that we're still in the process of building for a whole bunch of other reasons of land, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think at the end of the day, how we package it is going to be very important. But again, this doesn't take into us, we're kind of ahead of the curve, but process-wise, we're supposed to put the two together, and typically we make rate changes as of January. I think it's appropriate from a customer perspective to leave it from March, just because there's no. We don't want to jerk the customer around, right? Stable and predictable is better to the extent we can make it predictable.
You can go to Bob and then Dennis. You're set over. You go to Dennis.
So I've been on this board for about 8 years now, and I've been on the grid for my whole life. So for reliability, RMLD's always had it since I can remember. But that spreadsheet you have in front of you, when I started on the board, we were towards the bottom as far as lowest rates. And each year we're creeping up that list. So we're talking we're in the middle of the pack, but we are making a run to higher up on that list. And I've watched every year us move further into the pack. So you're saying middle of the pack, but when I started on the board 8 years ago, we were at the bottom of the pack and we had reliability. I know we got to look at the future and things like that, but now you're going to add another 10%. We move up in person. Then next year we have 10. We're creeping up towards the IOUs and not being. I don't know what Danvers is, and I know we're not going to be that price.
We'll never catch up.
We won't get them. But I'm saying on that list as far as municipalities, we're coming closer to the top of the municipalities each year. And I know you're trying to think outside the box and look at different ways of generating energy. But
yeah, I think
it's in 8 years we've moved up 8 spots.
I hear the caution. Right. Honestly, I do. And the world we're now in a very different energy world than we were we passed, a decade ago, or 2015, 2020. And all the stuff that we're trying to do right now is to be ahead of the curve. So, all these, there's very good leadership and very good management at all of these different MLPs. And just like us, their cost structure is driven primarily by their power supply structure. Some of these guys at the very bottom, whoever did it 20 or 30 years ago, we're all in on nuclear, right? And in many of these cases, and I know one of them very specifically, 90% of his portfolio is nuclear contracted 30 years ago. There's no way we can correct for that. So we'll never be at the bottom. The things we're doing right now with in-territory generation, all the work that we're doing to try and figure out how to improve our cost structure is to be ahead of the curve so that when the stuff hits the fan in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it's going to get more crazy. And again, I'm an optimist, I honestly am. But we are going to be in a better position so that the lights will always stay on, right? And the rates will still be at the bottom third, bottom half. You look at, if you want to go back and we can look at each one of these, but some of the guys at the top half, you got my point. I hear you're speaking like look, there's no equity position for us on the leadership team. Like we honestly our mentality is how do we serve our customers as best we possibly can? Reliable, low cost, not carbon. And George, yeah, so anyways, go ahead.
George. Yeah, I'm kind of on Dennis' point. I know I watch it and that increase that we saw and it didn't come to realization. It's not even close, but right. Yeah. But there is a cost for liability. And that's what you're trying to build here. So yeah, you gotta keep going. You gotta keep going. So just to build up on George's point, I mean, last year, I think it was 12% when we sat here at the 14%. Right. And then when fuel went away, it ended up being like 8%. You came back, or 8 to 9%. And then once again, I know you have to report what we're projecting for the fuel and capacity as part of the rate, but I mean, I did the math. The real portion of this that's in your control is 2% of that 7.6. It's 2.1% for the 7.6. And the other 5.5 is due to the fuel and the capacity. So I think maybe the messaging to the ratepayers would be, this is stuff that's out of our control as a pass-through that is most likely going to change. It's 5.5%. So what we can affect and what we're actually asking for is a 2.1% increase on what we can control. And if you look at it that way, it's really not that bad because the other stuff's going to be whatever it is. And then, because, this year could go the opposite of last year. Last year, you guys were like, oh, you sold a 14 and you got a 9. Yeah. This year, you're selling a 7 or an 8 and you might sell a 12 or 14. Yeah. So you might want to have that ready is actually this is the piece that we can control and this other stuff we just have to pass through. Yeah. And then obviously if you collect a little bit more, that you have to give it back to the ratepayer somewhere that's the rate stabilization fund or other. Yeah. But yeah. So.
But just one of the points, there's been a great point. I moved back to Reading 8 years ago. In 8 years, my rate's gone up in every single year. Almost every single year I've been, it's gone up and up and up and up. Everything goes up. I get that. But I just go back to what we can control. You're swagging the number. I get it. But let's swag lower.
It's not swag, but it's an estimate.
It's an estimate.
Yeah.
So if we put it in a lower number, and again, the fuel, right? That's irrelevant to the conversation. Just passing through. We have to pay the cost. The customer has to pay the cost. Everybody does.
That's the majority.
It's the majority, right? So what you say then is what we can control. We're going to do 4% increase of we can control. We don't control fuel. That's everybody's. That's what killed the IOUs. All of them. Because they renegotiated at a terrible time. Right. So has come way down, but. Ours again, fuels is a pass through, but I just tell them advertising another 8% increase after another one last year.
Are you saying not so much change the numbers, but how we present it?
I think you present. We're going to raise 5% in our controllable costs.
Okay.
You know,
So-
I just think rather,
Totally, so I think that's great, because at the end of the day, right, these don't come into play until March, like literally 5 months down the road, and we actually can't file them until January 1st for the DPU. So, and we have to just file them within 60 days plus or minus. So, you know, this is our baseline assumption right now, just like last year, right? We're going to sit down and, I mean, realistically, we're going to sit down in January. We're already talking about the agenda for January. We'll sit down and say, these are the final numbers that we are proposing, right? And that's when we'll do the broad communication. I mean, people can watch all this discussion, right? They can see, the structure, they can see all the concern that all of us have. How do we manage all this? But I think what I hear you saying is, when we actually go out to make it public, let's think about how we, we want to present honestly, but like, what's variable, what's fixed, what's not fixed, what we control, what we don't control, how does it all work? There's quite a bit of stuff on the website from 2 years ago. We'll dust that off, we'll tune that up, I'd say, because it was pretty good the way we structured it. But so I hear you saying not so much about the proposed rate stuff here, but let's look at it again, and how we present it's going to be very important. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah. So let me expand upon that, what you just said. So basically, these numbers are what they are today. When you go to file the rates, they may change.
Yeah, the fuel, and the cap and trans will change. The customer charge, distribution energy charge will not change. It will be the same.
Probably not.
So in other words, these numbers, you see that.
But these numbers, Phil, the reason these numbers are there, they have to be consistent with the operating budget and the capital budget.
Right.
So that's why I don't want to.
But when you actually go to file the rates, is it going to reflect?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, to answer your question, no, the intention was the rates they'll be exactly like this. But what we forecast a monthly bill to be for the next 12 months, from March of 2024 to February of 2025, will be a different number. Because, as Jason mentioned, what we know about fuel and capacity and transmission will be different. But those three items, customer charge, distribution energy charge, and distribution demand charge, and those are the numbers in the final rates. Those will be just as they're presented here.
Just like last year, when they had the 14%, those three numbers were what they were.
Yeah,
and
did not change.
When they went down to 8% because fuel changed, those numbers did not change.
Yeah. If you look at the backup, the fuel adjustment, it basically says here, right? I'm looking at residential A, it's in your package. The bill for service hereunder may be increased or increased as provided by the standard fuel adjustment rates clause. So that's the variable piece. So to answer your question, we're not going to file these right now. They're all queued up and ready to go because you have to see what we would be filing. But at the end of the day, this is what we would file on January 1st. And these numbers that are in Schedule 301 and 302, et cetera, are the ones that feed, because all of these feed the revenue line, right? The way the budget comes together, what's the kilowatt hour sales forecast by rate class? And then what's the rate by rate class? And all these components, that gives us the revenue line for the operating budget. So these have to be consistent with the operating budget.
Can we comment with the customer charge?
Yeah, sure.
Makes sense. That's actually not that bad.
It's not. Thank you, Jason.
So where I work, we did a study and they were proposing that we go to $25 a month. Because it's supposed to cover all your fixed charges and the distribution energy charge, so it's really fair. So $7 I think is what we're at right now too. So yeah, it's depends on how you structure the rate, but that's actually
a good number. No, let me say different. It's a low number.
It's a lower number to pay with, but you probably need to get it if it gets the study.
Well, we're going to do a more detailed one, but I don't think this is all the trade-offs you have to make. Who's your rate base? There are people that are on more fixed. Anyways, there's a bunch of trade-offs, but good. Thank you. That's a low number. Thank you.
Right, where are we?
Motion and vote. Or more discussion.
CAB is the first one up, so.
I'm going to make that correct.
Please.
And move that the Citizens Advisory Board recommends the Board of Commissioners vote to accept the changes and the general manager's recommendations replace. Yes.
You replace.
To replace the following MVP rates effective for billing from March 1st, 2024. Replace 301 residential Schedule A with 309. Replace 302 residential time of use schedule A2 with 310. Replace 303 commercial schedule C with 311. Replace 304 industrial time of use schedule 1 with 312. Replace 305 school schedule SCH with 313.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Okay, so we know, so the recommendation, let the record show that the recommendation is 4-0 at this point. So I need somebody to make the motion on this side. Yeah, Pam's our designated motion mover.
Move that the Board of Commissioners, on the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Board, vote to accept the General Manager's recommendation to replace the following MDPU rates effective for billings on or after March 1st, 2024. Replace 301 residential schedule A with 309. Replace 302 residential time of use schedule A2 with 310. Replace 303 commercial schedule C with 311. Replace 304 industrial time of use schedule I with 312. Replace 305 school schedule SCH with 313.
Okay, is that seconded?
Seconded.
And move the second. We'll go in seniority. Mr. Talbot.
Good job. Aye.
Mr. Cole. No. Ms.
Aye.
Mr. Desline.
Aye.
And so we got 3-1. The chair is going to vote present.
Abstain.
Present. Present.
In Lexington.
Okay. I would also like to propose another motion here. Move that the Board of Commissioners instruct the General Manager to return at the January 2024 meeting to review the costs that will make up the rates, behind the rates. And you accept that motion? Erica, did you get the motion?
Move that the board instruct the GM to return to the January 24 meeting to review the costs that make up behind the rates.
Yes. Okay, you got it. Okay. Is that seconded? Bob seconded.
I'll second it.
Yeah. I think we just hand vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Board, that carries 5-0. Okay.
In that spirit, actually, a couple of things I would like to have more information on, and maybe I could make it as a motion on the fly, is move that we request the General Manager. What are the January meeting? Is that a good
January meeting? I think it's fine.
One is to give us some more options for time of use rates. We keep increasing the same rates without really changing the structure of the rates. Move that you would present us with options for trying to attack the peak more aggressively through rates, just options. So that's and secondly, and maybe this is just a question you can answer now, in which case I can remove it, is the question I had before about this isn't a motion anymore, it's a lecture. So let me back up 1 second to ask a question. When we keep doing roughly the same rate increases and the industrial one's always lower, as you do percentage increases, does the spread get wider and wider over the years? So that like residents pay 50% more than industry right now. Was it always 50%, or because of we keep doing the same percentage factor across these rate classes, that the gap grows wider, the increases on residents get even?
To answer your question now on that particular piece, we didn't structure it on a percentage basis. But if you look at what the outcome came out as the industrial increased more than the residential one. So I haven't gone back to run your analysis, but again, we don't drive these off of percent changes.
Okay, well, I always see similar percentages every year that we're posting across these different.
Yeah, I think actually, so last year, as Bill mentioned at the very beginning, the residential had a higher percentage increase than the industrial, and this year it's the opposite. But again, that's a result of the calculation, that's the percent change is not the input. But to answer your question, is it roughly 50%? I'll say yes for a while.
So then here's my motion. My motion is move that the board directs the general manager to provide the board with options to increase the use of time-based rates, or to give us options for how to do that, and that you give us a report on whether this spread between residential and industrial on a percentage basis has changed over some reasonable period of time.
2017, we'll go back to 2015. That's your rate changes.
Erica, did you get that
We're
motion?
gonna need that one.
Okay, so
Yeah.
move that the board
Yep.
directs the
Board of
general,
Commissioners. Board of
Board of
Commissioners.
Commissioners, thank
Board
you,
of Commissioners.
directs the general manager to provide us at the January meeting some options for how we can increase use of time-based rates to attack our peak costs.
Can we modify that? Can we say how so there's the time of use piece, and we talked about that before in terms of we're kind of, our hands are kind of tied behind our back a little bit. But I think your question of what other options can we do to be more successful on peak management? Of whatever option.
No, I want it to be about rates.
It'll be about rates.
Okay, so to give us options that
It's not all time of use. That's what I'm saying.
of how we can use rates to better attack peak costs. Okay, because we keep seeing, this is the parenthetical, you don't have to take down, Erica. We keep seeing the same rate classes year after year with no new types of time of use rates and no new technologies implementing those.
So you will see in the capital plan there.
Okay.
AMI.
And then they have to be approved tonight.
So that's the first half, and also to provide us a report on how residential rates relative to industrial rates have
Changed over time.
How has that spread changed over time?
As opposed to there being a motion, can we just make that a sense of the commission?
I'd rather have it be a motion. You made yours a motion and we seconded it and approved it. So I'd like it to be a motion. And if that was clear enough, Erica, it's basically asking them for a report on how to better use time-based rates and to give us a report on the spread between industrial and residential rates.
Yeah. So I'll take the action out of time-based rates, but I will also look at options that are focused on rates, not necessarily time-based.
You can
I'll
expand the scope of the question and answer it more widely than it was tailored.
So the motion to say time rates?
Yeah, leave time rates on.
Yeah, to give us options for imposing, give us options for using more time-based rates than we do, and a report on how the residential and industrial spread has changed over years.
Can you read the motion as to what you got, so we're all clear, please? Wait.
Yeah, text.
Okay, so, move that the Board of Commissioners direct General Manager to provide at the January 2024 meeting options on how, it says we, but how RMLD.
Options for increasing use of time-based rates to reduce peak costs. And a report on how residential versus industrial rates, on what that gap, how that compare over time on a percentage basis, whether there's been a change.
Compare over time on percentage.
That's good.
Good enough.
I think you're good.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so is that a second? Do I have a second on that? I got a second. I do this for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And this is the sense of raise hand. All in favor, please raise your right hand. That carries 5-0. All right, very good. All right, to the budget. Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, no, it's another way to. It's another way to stand back.
Down court.
H2O.
They're gonna charge us to clean that up.
Someone clean spot.
Add that to the budget.
99 cents. It's just all that's run.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we won't take quite as long on that. Yeah. I'm gonna go quick.
You've got more.
Deeper it is,
Yeah, just nail. We're taking 5 minutes. Yes. Some members stepped out for a moment. In fact, yeah. I really could like early to this. We're hanging out.
All righty.
Okay, ready to go?
I believe so.
Right.
Oh, good. There's always one that.
Okay. All right, session.
Go for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm here to present the 2024 calendar year budget, and here we go. So the 2024 calendar budget process started way back in about June/July time. Okay. So when we made a request to all the different divisions to send out their, we sent out our pro forma budgets to all the different divisions for their input on that. In August, the different divisions submitted their preliminary budget requests. The labor distribution tables were updated, and the capital projects will be being done assembled. In September, the budget modules were assembled, preliminary numbers were assembled. The power supply information was put together, and adjustments and requirements continued through September. So that brings us up here to today of October, where we are coming before you, both CAP and the Board of Commissioners, for a vote on the 24 budget. Looking ahead, because usually when we talk about budget, after the vote is done, it's kind of outside out until the next go around. In terms of what we do throughout the rest of the year, we work to close out all the purchase orders and requisitions for calendar year 23. One of the mandates that I brought in was to really start to fine tune our procurement process and fine tune some of the power processes to make it more efficient, more streamlined. And then lastly, we split the calendar year beginning the last week of December into January in order to close out or begin to close out the prior calendar year budget and move into the new budget. So that kind of gives you a timeline of where we're going. Beyond that, we have an audit that comes up, and then we have we begin the process once again. So this process really doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's ongoing for a good 6 months a year. Our calendar year 24 budget has 3 key elements: the operating budget, the capital budget, and the rates that we just discussed, and you, the board, and CAP voted preliminary or voted approval.
operating budget. So for calendar year 23, we had proposed, or we had not proposed, but for the calendar year 23 budget, we had budgeted $109 million. Our projected revenues by the end of this calendar year are approximately $104 million. Again, the difference coming in, as we discussed earlier, regarding the fuel revenue, and that's due to big savings within the energy market, as was discussed. Moving forward, our comparative budgets for our net income are as follows. Last year, as you recall, we had a proposed or a net income of under $1 million. This year, we're up to $15.7 million. And again, that's as a result of the power supply expenses being down as a result of, again, big savings within the energy market. We already went through the slide. I'm going to skip over it with your permission. So let's look at some of our operating budget, our power supply within our operating budget. As you can see in the very top level, our forecasted kilowatt revenue or kilowatt hour sales starts out at 660 million kilowatt hours in calendar year 24, and it rises up to 724 million kilowatt hours by calendar year 29. If you look at the base load growth, it's approximately 1% over the next several years based off of base assumptions. As you recall, our power supply is a pass-through, and we dampen it monthly over the year to address increases in 23, 24, and 25. 90% of our entire energy is hedged, meaning it's contracted in the 23, 24 years. There's a higher mix of wind, hydro, solar, and essentially pushing our average costs up, as we discussed during the previous piece. 10% of our energy is in the open market, and as Greg explained, it is highly priced and highly volatile. Essentially, because of our increasing transmission costs and capacity costs, along with the fuel costs fluctuating, we are projecting that our operating revenues to increase incrementally year over year from $115 million up to $138 million by calendar year 29.
Ben, I'm sorry, I just don't understand the last bullet. Has to be really clear.
So it's as we look forward in the market, we project a downward trend through 2027, but then it's forecasted up thereafter. So if you look at the capacity line item, you'll see it starts off at $16.1 million. $16.1 million. It then drops to about 13.9, and then again down to 12.01 or 12.1, and then it gradually starts to rise over the course of the years.
Capacity is what we're paying the power plant in ISO New England to remain in place. And the idea is that as more offshore wind comes online, they'll be needed less, so the payments are going to go down, requiring them to stay in the market, and will be fewer participants. But we do expect the transmission, because they're building on the transmission system, partly to support the offshore wind and all these other assets. And that's why the transmission goes up at a high rate of assets kind of levels out.
So aside from our power supply, the other 29% of our operating costs are found within labor, the electrification and efficiency program, or customer billing. In particular, within our labor, as of calendar year 2024, our budget consists of 107 positions. And as of last week, we are currently staffed at 92 positions, of which 7 are co-op students. In 2024, we projected to add 18 positions, which includes a tree crew, a director of engineering, a director of operations, and first-class linemen, to name a few. So as we continue to build out our infrastructure, we have to bring on the human capacity and the human capital in order to manage those processes. In terms of the electrification and efficiency program, we've included a new weatherization program, which is new incentives that are added to this process. And we've increased the number of our solar installations along with our air source heat pump installations that we have projected in 2024. And lastly, I cannot reiterate this enough. Our supply is a pass-through. It is noteworthy that it is variable in cost. So essentially, as you can see, our budget primarily consists of power and then operations. And the operations cost is approximately, as I said, 29% of our entire operating budget. Any questions so far? Yes.
Right. You know, just an obvious statement is, you know, people are expensive, right? You know, do we consider a hiring freeze and a tree? Why did we add a tree crew? How did we put on a internal tree crew? So that's always been an external source.
Yeah, we're anticipating, so we looked at a tree, we have 2 tree crews that are running
Constantly.
constantly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's gonna, and when we looked at it, that's gonna be consistent. So when we asked ourselves, we're spending roughly about $1.5 million on trees right now. To bring the crew in-house, we're gonna be $500 million less.
I beg to differ. Absolutely, 100% beg to differ. You bring that internal, you're dealing with companies that do this every day, all do it, massive amounts of crews, massive amounts of people, they can rotate people through. Now you deal with vacation 6 times, your efficiency drops off the planet. So being external and putting that external is you know, something that we should talk about that. That's a very surprising add.
That's a key driver at the end of the day. I mean, if we looked at, you know, again, experience and feedback is welcome. And we have the same issue in terms of line crews, right? You know, we have internal line crews and we have subcontractor line crews, and our subcontractor line crews are most expensive. We did some preliminary analysis on tree crews, right? That's why we put it in the budget. And the other question is it going to be a temporary thing? And our assumption was tree crews is going to be around as long as we're here.
You know, tree management is key to reliability. It's the number 1 reliability metric.
Exactly right.
Absolutely.
Agree.
But bringing that crew in internal it's a huge expense. You're talking about 2 trucks, 4 guys.
Yep.
You know, that is immense.
5 guys actually.
5, yeah. And then, you know, your efficiency of 5 of, you know, rotating them through with a, you know, 80% efficiency rate on somebody with, you know, all the time off versus a contractor that runs every day, they take that on. That's a huge jump. I had no idea.
You also run that analysis. What I hear you saying.
Yeah,
I don't disagree, Bob. The only thing I'll say is through the state bid contract for labor, tree trimming on the electric lines just recently became prevailing wages and are really high. So I guess the analogy, you have to take that because, and I'm not sure if internal, what you're saying, 8%, I agree with what you're saying. I don't know if that accounts for the difference or not. But
So tree trimming was the same as like snow plowing? It wasn't under prevailing wage?
Well, tree trimming for a town, regular tree trimming was prevailing wage when they worked for the electric department. It was not prevailing wage. And that was a change like 2 years ago that they now have to follow prevailing wage. Correct. And that thing doubled our tree trimming. When that happened.
Well, we did that, between 2 years ago and this past year. We were 600, 1.5 million.
Yeah, it was quite double. It was like it was a good increase when that happened.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm not sure it's as big of a gap as it could be.
Yeah. I just efficiency of vehicles.
No, I might not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's huge.
Yeah. So we are looking at the prevailing wage. We are taking into consideration that cost as we continue to price out and look at bringing staff in. That's one of the areas that we were looking at. In fact, that was something that we talked about internally with our manager of contracts and purchasing.
So they would internally get all the benefits, the pension,
Oh, yeah.
and all that stuff. So I don't know what the different, which way it swings, but it's not, I don't think it's as obvious as just looking at it. There's a lot more nuances to that that I think hopefully went into that.
Can I ask a follow-up question on
Go ahead.
that? You mentioned reliability, so, I think about storm come through and a bunch of trees are down. I was tree crews internally who are going and managing that, right? And dealing with
Well,
that.
tree crews and our line crews too.
To fix the five pieces,
Yeah,
right?
so the tree crews are primarily ongoing maintenance. That to Bob's point, is a constant because trees grow and we're trimming. And so, and then when it's storm related, it depends on the situation. The crews are on board, and all of the linemen, with exception of the apprentices, but all of them are basically equipped. with
I just think
equipment.
about how, one of the key elements of our reliability are, our line crews who are focused on our area only.
Yeah.
And we don't have to compete elsewhere. And I think about if we outsource tree crews, do we have to then compete for time if we run into that situation?
All tree resources are outsourced today for all utilities, basically. But I guess I speak for all, but the majority of them, they are external crews.
Sure.
And during a storm event, yes, you do compete for
Right.
that. But if you have a existing contract, they will give you crew because you already have an existing contract. You have that relationship with Stu. And when you don't use them and you say, oh, hey, I need you, that's when you have a challenge. And during a major storm event, the most important thing is tree, right? Because you can't do anything without getting the trees out of the way. Then you can start restoration. Tree crews are
And just another small point, and I'll say this for a different purpose, but reliability, as Bob mentioned, is tied directly to trees. Trees is the number one source of outages, and that requires tree trimming. And then another time we'll walk you through data in terms of the direct relationship with the policies that are in place in different towns that allow us to reduce outage. So Bob's talking about restoration. We're talking about how do you avoid the tree coming down again, or the branches, no should say tree coming down. Two important points.
So this seems like a counter market approach. Well, this seems like a counter market approach. Like you're saying, most people in the market have established outsourced tree crews. So that's for IOU.
Yeah.
What about MLPs?
More MLPs are bringing in the house. And we're the largest, and we're one of the two largest guys us in Taunton. So the smaller guys have already been bringing in the house. And so that was part of it.
So that's also just a good reference.
Yeah. But I think,
It's a good
Bob
point.
brings up some good points in terms of, we looked at it, we did high level analysis on it, right? But, I mean, at the end of the day, how it goes back to the point, right? We're all on the same page of how to make this as most efficient as we possibly can, right? In terms of a cost structure, but cost is right behind reliability. So, tree trimming is a sensitive topic for a lot of people, but it is paramount in terms of avoiding the outages to begin with. And then the second point is having the availability of the crews to clear the trees before you can do that. And so, again, there's trade-offs all the way around. And the question is, how we balance everything with reliability and cost. We look at trees as trees are not, that's not a temporary build, not building a substation and then they're gone, right? Trees are always short of some major catastrophic event. We're always going to do tree trimming.
Yep, it's increased. It's going the opposite way because things are growing fast.
They are right now.
And I will say, as a customer of an IOU, which I will not mention, when we had the power outages in the town that I live in, I was wishing that we had, or the IOU had, internal tree crews because we waited days upon days, even though they were saying that the tree crews were out there. I walked down the street and the sign, nothing there. So I would feel more comfortable having somebody internal, addressing these issues as opposed to externally as a contractor.
We'll do more analysis.
My only 2 cents is that in 2021, when this line item came up in the budget, it went up like 110%, like from 6
doubled it.
change to 1.2. So let's stop it from going from 1.3 to closer to 3 million.
On the outsource basis?
Well, I mean, the labor, I guess, is all going to the West Coast where there's a lot more work and getting paid a lot of money. So that all became kind of difficult. And
yeah, I mean, that goes back to the fundamental issue, right? 10% of our cost structure is labor, whether it's direct or indirect. And, we do 3-year contracts on the tree crews. Right? And so we're coming up to end of contract. Right? And kind of the fair statement is, that's before we pull the trigger, one way or the other, and let's do a little bit more analysis on it and see what the bid's going to be. But it's a specialty labor group, back to what Bob said. And, I think, and I'll have to talk to some of the other GMs in terms of how they looked at it, but just in our local area there with the smaller guys, there's never bringing the tree crews in.
I'm sorry, maybe on the wrong page. You've allocated how much for this roughly?
In the operating costs?
Yes.
Remember what so if we outsource it, I'll make a broad statement. It'll probably be $500,000 higher on the operating budget, roughly. But we'll clarify that.
So you're saying that by hiring this crew, you're going to eliminate mayor or the outside crew?
Yeah, pretty much. We're going to. So the step here could be a twofold step. They would do the first crew and keep mayor, and then after a year, talk to them and see how the crew's working out, and then maybe do the second crew. That would be the structure. So not all in. We'd end up renting the truck the first year, see what kind of equipment really works for us. I mean, our kind of work is pretty predictable, right? And in fact, the crews that we have right now, 2 crews, the crews that have been with us for, 4 or 5 years. So they know our territory and know how we work. They know how to work with the various towns. I mean, it's, it's smooth. And I'll say this purposely. It works very smooth in 4 of our towns. Our host town, we are not as successful and we are behind on tree trimming. And we will show data that shows that the number of outages are higher in our host town than everywhere else due to the fact that we are constrained in terms of the trimming of trees that we are allowed to. Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement.
If you go to page 117 in the package, you'll see you've got item 593, which is the tree trimming. No, with the operating budget.
117, did you break it out?
117. Page 117, but my copy is page 117.
Yes, perfect.
You can see that cost has gone down from 1.5 million to about 800,000.
Page 117, what line item? What line item?
It should be 593.
Thank you.
Maintenance line street trimming.
Yeah.
You can see what that number's gone down to.
There you go.
Yeah, 47.
There's a delta.
I mean, in the manufacturing world, if you're going to outsource something every day, you look at bringing it in the house. So I guess I can see what your thought process is.
The thought process is on.
Every day of the week you have them cutting, then
I mean,
you're paying someone else overhead.
Yeah, and again, there's certain benefits to doing that. But we have a very basic question. Is this temporary or is this, like you said, something we do every day?
220 days a year, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we'll walk through the rest of it. If you want to make the motion to approve it conditional, or if you want to review it on the 15th, we can do that as well. I think the point's valid, right? We'll look at it a little more carefully. It's at the end of the day, like everything we do, right? There's trade-offs. But back to Bob's point, right? The question that we have internally: if we hire these people, we're going to have them forever, right? They're going to be part of our team forever. So that's that's part of the caution in terms of short-term and long-term. But the bigger picture is how do we look at how we run the operations, right? Where can we be more efficient? And again, that's our approach.
No, you're already paying the tree companies overhead of management. You already have management here, so you're reducing the cost of the management of a tree by bringing it in-house because you're not paying for their overhead.
Yeah, I think back to Jason's point, he said, look at the prevailing, there was, before 2 years ago, there was a benefit to outsource. There was a financial benefit to outsource. I think what he's pointing out is, the labor cost is going to be the same, but it's going to be prevailing wage. It's not set by the state. So now we're just talking about the secondary issues that are tied to the labor rates, pensions and sick time and vacation time and all that stuff. And you're right, the management. So there will be the management costs because we have most of the management costs, but we'll probably have to leave the tree crew and fill in when somebody's on vacation or whatever. That's the intention. And the intention was also to walk before we run. But it's not a 0.2% change in every dollar counts. And so this is. I'd rather outsource it, but we're trying to be pragmatic. So. Again, we can look at it in more detail if you want, but I think the big issues are there. I think we'll do one more run on the analysis. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So if you outsource it, going by this analysis, your numbers would increase, your budget would increase.
Yeah, we'll increase. That's right.
Where are the vehicles? Are the vehicles in that line item? Or are they in another line item?
No, the vehicles, those are in the capital budget. And then they come through the income statement through the depreciation line. Okay. This is labor depreciation, operating costs, chainsaws.
You get an increase in the cap.
The capex would come down, labor would go up.
Yeah, actually.
That's 650.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Jason's got a question because in the back, if you look on the overhead line work and all the labor, that's actually is tracking out how much is the capital. So you can do that with tree trimming too.
Yeah. Right.
So that's part of the total cost operating, whether it's capital work or not capital work. Some of that work is going to build it on the capital.
Oh, you're saying different, but yeah. So how we account for it? So the capital goes to the depreciation line, but you're saying when we build it out?
Yeah, when you actually tree trim, if you're trimming for a capital project, not for your cycle trimming, that gets capitalized. So you can actually move some of that into your capital budget into the depreciation. So that is probably included in that number. Right?
That would be true. Yeah.
Sure. You still know on the labor for the workforce when they work in capital projects, but it wasn't still up to that. So
your bill is the same way typically, right? When you get your bill, your bill is paid against the capital or an expense. So it's the same. There's no change there.
From a cash perspective, it's still cash out, right? And that's at the end of the day, we're running a cash business. I mean, however we account for it, it's still, it's cash. All right, so we'll continue on.
Yeah, continue. I would like to.
You want a little more discussion on this one? It's actually please. Totally fine. Keep running.
Move on. Okay. All right. Calendar year 24 capital budget, we are forecasting it to be $31 million approximately. If you recall last year, our capital budget was approximately $26 million for calendar year 24. Like that in 2023, we believe the calendar year 24 budget is going to be $26.1 million. However, this year, we're projecting it to be $31 million, which is only $5 million over what we had for last year. In our analysis, we have reduced $4 million from the capital budget for 2024 by reducing some costs in terms of the EVSE program, pushing out the grid modernization program, and service connections. We also added land acquisition for $9 million in Wilmington as we prepare to, manage our increased load that's coming into the territory as we're projecting over the next several years. At the same time, we have carried forward approximately $14 million in 4 key major programs. The first being the New Wilmington substation, or more affectionately known as substation number 6, the transformers and capacitor banks program, the grid modernization program, which is the AMI MDMS program combined, and then, as we discussed, rolling stock upgrades. In terms of our capital budget moving on this year, for calendar year 2024, as you can see, we are forecasting $31 million. Going on to 25, $20.3 million. 26 goes down to 17.1. 27 is 15.3. 28 is 11.6, and 29 is $8.3 million. Keep in mind that as we return to the capital budget each and every year, we look at different projects coming online. So what you see in calendar year 2029 is not indicative of what 2029 is going to be. That is indicative of the projects that we have right now going forward through 29. As new needs assessments come in, as we look at our capital needs, whether it has to be looking at state of good repair projects or dealing with capital state of good repair projects. Essentially what we're doing each and every year is resetting the deck, looking at our needs and programming for that particular year moving out each additional year. Yes, Rebecca.
I see calendar year 2023 says 22.849. You said 26 million in 2023.
No, we were just talking about in 2023, the estimate for 2024 would have been 26 instead of 31. It was just 20, he was talking about 24.
So the estimate last year, the estimate
was lower than
this year.
Okay. And so this 22 does that 22 include the 14 million that's carried over?
A portion of that $14 million, $14 million of that 22
is being carried over.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So 22 is the amount that you would allocate for 2023.
Correct.
But you're spending some of that in.
We're carrying that.
Okay, you're carrying it forward. So from a cash point of view, you actually.
We were not able to spend the full 22 million in calendar year 20. We will not be able to.
Yeah. So this is an accounting number. It's not a cash.
It's not a cash. Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. No, I just wanted to.
No, very important.
So I'm going to go through several slides in terms of projects. And when we look at the projects, one of the ways that I wanted to look at it is over the life of those particular programs. Historically speaking, RMLD.
On this particular kind, just, one item in the, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be nitpicking. In current year 2024, the first number in that column has a decimal spot in it, where all the other numbers do not.
Oh, that's operator error.
Operator error. Okay. Tell him account.
It's going to account.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So as I said, as we move forward into some of these projects, I'm looking at the life cycle of the entire project, as opposed to the individual calendar year of that allocation. We talk about the allocation for that particular calendar year, but when you're forecasting out and when you're planning out capital projects, you're really looking at the life cycle of that program. Make sense so far? Yeah, excellent. So the Wilmington substation, we're planning from really, it goes back before 2024, but in terms of budgeting and scheduling, we're going from 2024 through 2029. We're anticipating approximately $28.5 million in terms of total costs over the life of that project as a result of the continuing work that we're doing. Now, this is inclusive of the system impact study, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, has added additional costs to the tail end of the project as we have been discussing internally. We've already started in terms of the procurement process and working with Virginia Transformer. We have already contracted to purchase the 2 new substation transformers. So this project is underway. It is totaling approximately $28 million, of which we are anticipating to spend approximately $10 million this year as a result of, yes, in 2024, as a result of essentially the milestone payments on that contract.
And site
rent too.
And deposit on additional.
As we move forward to the AMI-MDM program, again, looking at the universal or the overarching program, you're looking at from approximately 2024 to 2029 for the implementation of that project. In total, you're looking at approximately $18.2 million. And again, these are based off of that entire lifespan of the project. This year alone, we're anticipating to spend approximately about $1 million in terms of milestone payments.
So 1 million in 2024.
Correct.
Just a sidebar, so have you contracted out for the AMI mesh network yet?
No, we're actually, we're finishing the bid specs right now, and we're going to get it out before the end of the year, by Thanksgiving. Why do you ask?
One of the things when we first came here is like, there's fiber available in Reading.
Yeah.
Reading has fiber. Is it going to be an outsourced? Are they going to install their own fiber? Or are we they're going to incorporate the fiber? Or would you, now you talked about using training, maybe internal line crews or line resources.
Oh, yeah.
To generate that mesh network, because that's
so everybody else is on the same page as you and I are on. So the meter system requires communication back. So it requires communication back to some central point. And the question on the table, it's a constant question, is what's the communication mechanism to get it from individual meters back to the central point? And there's a bunch of different strategies, fiber being part of it. Actually, in the specification, we've left it open. We're trying to see if there's any other technology. So we kept it open in terms of what do you recommend from a technology perspective? I mean, in terms of what's available at this point in time, there's a lot of changes right now. But it's a critical piece. It's a critical cost piece, right? As well as the reliability of it at the end of the day. And what information we can transfer.
RMLD has more fiber than the town does.
Yeah, but then when you start talking about something like this, the amount that you need is significant. Depending on how you do it, you might not even use it. It might be, it might be a wireless network, but it's how
and collectors.
The meters don't work without connectivity, right?
Yeah, they collect data for a period of time, and then the registers get full, and then they say, "Hey, what do I do now?" But all sorts of technical. But I think the key point for us in this discussion is because they're spread across 51 square miles. That's the size of our territory. That communication. We're not grid or IOU. We're not massive, but that communication mechanism is a key. The communication from the meter back to a central hub is a critical part of the technology and cost. It's not just the meters that plug in the side of the wall. It's not a trivial project at all. And MDM is the first step of that, which is tonight's discussion.
Moving on, transformers.
Good recommendation. We'll take it.
Moving on to transformers and capacitor banks. Again, this is an ongoing program, as I would like to call it, a state of good repair program, bringing up all of our transformers to a level of state of good repair. In 2024, we're looking to purchase or go out to bid for $2 million. However, when you look at the lifespan of that entire program, inclusive of the carry forward, from now until 2029, you're talking about a $16 million program because of the $4 million that we're carrying forward from prior years due to supply chain issues that we've all been experiencing. Plus, as we look forward to future years in terms of projecting out our needs in terms of transformers and capacitor banks. Rolling stock. Again, an ongoing annual program. From 2024 through 2029, we anticipate to spend approximately $6 million. However, in 2024 alone, we're looking at approximately $2 million. And as we were discussing earlier, we've taken into account the need for a tree truck and a chipper truck, along with addressing some long-term state of good repair issues regarding, the useful life of our rolling stock.
And just so you guys all understand an important element, you see in here forestry tree truck and forestry chipper. And the reason it's on, good point. The reason it's on this capital budget, remember I said we were going to rent first, most likely, is that so delivery of trucks like these are in excess of 12 months. And so if we wanted to order something in January, we wouldn't get it in January 2024. We wouldn't get it until sometime in 2025 or maybe 2026. The reason why it's important that we put it in next year's budget is that we can't go out to bid for those projects unless it's in the budget. So even though we aren't going to spend that money in 2024, it needs to be in the budget so that we can go through the state mandated 30B process. It's got to be in the budget before we can do anything. So this is, again, back to the question. This is not a cash budget, right? And we will, and you know, it's $31 million. We are not able, from a delivery perspective, to spend that $31 million in 2024. So part of the reason why it looks like a big number is we're setting the stage for electrification, right? Back to transformers is a great example. Trucks are part of it too. But the second piece is we need to be able to place the orders because the delivery times have gotten so long on many of these pieces of equipment. So we see $31 million. We know it's a massive number, but it's not what we're actually going to spend. And we typically have not spent up to budget anyways. Follow? Yeah.
What's your goal in terms of how much you actually do spend year over year? If you think about it as a percentage of revenue, maybe, or
yeah. So I haven't run that number yet. That's a good question because we've been averaging somewhere between 8 and 12, or 8 to 10, 8 to 12 million in terms of actual cash spent. But that's going to change because the ticket items are getting more expensive. But that's an order of magnitude. The real driver for us is how fast we can get the projects done because.
Right.
Because when we start getting, like we're pretty good at looking down the road, but we'd rather place the order and get it tomorrow, get it installed and get it done. And the problem is, we place the order now and take the transformers, for example, not quite 24 months, but pretty darn close. Now there's a bunch of other things we have to do in the meantime, but we want, you got the point. So roughly $10 million plus or minus, well, it won't be minus, 10 million to 14 million a year for the next couple of years, realistically.
So you think of this budget you'll actually spend half of it?
The most. The most. The reason it's on there is so that we can start the process.
Totally get it. I'm actually more thinking like we also don't want to go too slow. So,
thank you. No, speed. This is
yeah, you get behind, right?
You get behind, you can't catch up, right?
Yeah.
The world's not going to wait for us.
Yeah.
Sorry about you.
No, there's also a 1.5 ton, half ton, or 1.5 ton.
Yeah.
Electric.
Yeah.
Which one is that? What, like that? Do you have that on order yet?
No.
So,
and so I'm glad you brought it up. Right? Two things. One is that, we have the heavy duty trucks, bigger trucks and bucket trucks, et cetera, but we also, for the engineers in particular, and the grid assets team, pickup trucks. As you guys know from discussions we had earlier in the year, right? We ended up having to be creative in terms of how we bought some pickup trucks back in the springtime that were ordered back in 21 and 22. We found a window. We're in a situation right now. So that's one piece. Second piece is we realize that electric vehicles aren't the end all be all for every part of our installation, right? For some parts of our application it works, for other parts it doesn't. But we've ordered some partial electrified, so what they call EPTO, so electric power takeoff for some of the bucket trucks, trying to work ourselves into it because to have a fully electrified vehicle is $200,000 more. And so we pushed those off in the earlier discussions that we had. But we need to get some experience with the pickup trucks, the crew trucks, not the crew trucks, but the engineers and the line trucks. Because we're going to learn, right? When it works, what doesn't work, how it makes it. So we had in the budget last year to buy two. We couldn't get them at all, right? And they were, if we could find them, they were $10,000 to $20,000 premiums. We said, we're not doing that. So we've got it back in the budget again. But if I can, because there's a lot going on. There's an availability of electric pickup trucks right now at list prices. And that might not be the case when we get to January. So depending on how we do with the capital budget, either tonight or tomorrow, I don't have this on motion. My apologies, I'm violating all sorts of, but I'd like to have the permission to move forward on the electric pickup truck because we might be able to get that done this year. Whereas we wait till next year because we can't do the process unless it's in the budget. It's not in this year's budget. We'll come back to that later.
So the next set of projects are smaller projects. So for example, with one exception, security upgrades.
So how much was the rolling stock for this year, 2024?
Approximately $2 million.
Next year, 2075.
Moving on, couple of smaller programs, and then we'll talk about land acquisition. Every year, we face all sorts of security threats as an MLP, and as a result, we are being proactive in terms of our security systems and the upgrades to perimeter access control systems and whatnot. Working with Burns and McDonnell, we have essentially revised our specifications in order to address the new needs in this changing environment. So for 2024, we have budgeted $325,000. However, over the course of the next several fiscal years, we're looking at $800,000 altogether. Because of these ongoing threats that we see as a result of various geopolitical events, we're being very proactive in terms of our security system. And we have a really phenomenal director of security and IT who is addressing these threats on a daily basis. So we want to make sure that we empower him with the correct tools in order to harden our systems.
This all appears to be a physical security budget here.
Yeah,
right.
this is just-
There may be separate cybersecurity.
So that's all in the software budget, and training and procedures. This is physical, and also the big difference is that we had actually started this project a couple of years back, and for a whole bunch of reasons tied to COVID, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the change between then and now is the increased importance of us providing harder, stringent security around our substations, which are typically not manned 24/7. So we've got some of the changes from the original budget, which is under $600,000, is tied to the substations in particular, which is we got to plan.
So we're up to the second to last slide here. One of the big acquisitions one of the big line items from this year's capital budget is the acquisition of land. As Greg mentioned earlier, we are working towards building out our infrastructure to address the forecasted load that will be coming into our territory. As a result, we are requesting essentially $9 million between Route 125 in Wilmington, the parcel of land there, and Maple Meadows. Maple Meadows being approximately in terms of the
reason the split is not important is we're in negotiations, so we don't want to get too much. Sorry.
And then lastly, here are some other capital budget items for 2024 alone. We are looking to invest up to $3 million, give or take, in various projects, which includes routine construction, our pole replacement program, facilities, IT, service connections, essentially day-to-day state of good repair type projects where we are maintaining the system that we have.
What is a force account?
So force accounts where we basically have to provide services, like if it's a state road, we have it. So like at Main Street, at the top of Main Street across from the Creamery Pizza place, I forgot the name of what anyways. Counts, right there. So that's an example of a forced account. The bridge work so it's anywhere where it's a state road primarily, and so we're required to.
I think there are 3 projects I read. I think 2 of them have to do with bridges in Wilmington.
Yeah, 2 and Bridge 2, yeah.
But the MBTA is redoing bridges over roads.
But typically around state roads. Right.
You get 50% of the money back for the cost. So, but I mean, you eat 50%.
Yeah. And in order to do all this stuff, you still have to have it in the budget.
So
it's not a big number all said and done, but it's still not.
In summary, as you can see, we have a very robust budget moving forward for calendar year 24 through 29. The bulk of our budget is found within 24 through 28 in terms of order of magnitude. As I discussed at the beginning of the presentation, our major cost drivers are the new Wilmington substation, substation number 6, the AMI mesh network, along with MDMS, the transformers, which is an annual program, and our rolling stock. Our goal is to be reliable, and in order to be reliable, we need to invest in these key assets to ensure that we remain reliable for years to come. Ultimately, we hope that through discussions here tonight that we will, motion to approve the capital budget and the operating budget as well. Thank you.
Now, I have one question, and it's a citizen asked me about. It has to do with Johnson Woods. There's some project you're doing in Johnson Woods on the loop there. one of the citizens asked me a question about what's going on. Actually asked me in church, honestly. Yeah, but this doesn't really explain what's going on.
Page 95.
Yeah.
I live in Johnson.
Yeah, but you understand what's going on there?
Yeah, they're adding one more loop.
Apparently there's some issue there.
There's one feed, they're adding a second feed.
Linfield, no, this is.
Ready?
We don't want Linfield. We're upgrading one of the original underground. I have it. I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest, this particular one.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of.
It's a radial development now, and they're gonna try to find a way to get a second feed over there. So if the cable fails, you can switch it around and keep it going.
They've expanded a lot of, homes there.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
Yeah.
So the property,
depends on
been
your-
expanded, so they need, that's the reason why.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, that place has grown from its original demand profile.
Yeah.
What that demand
Okay.
profile is
That's
today,
what I didn't
is-
understand.
it's gotta be tenfold what it was designed for. So having a second feed in is now a necessity. And that wasn't, originally it wasn't that big. So
He just built out everything. He just built it out. And he's got a deadline, I think, for next year or something to finish construction.
I'll follow with Brian on that one. So we're pretty diligent, Bob, in terms of, what's customer paid versus, because again, from a legislative perspective, from a franchise perspective, upgrades and investments that are specific to a particular property need to be borne by the property, ones that can be shared by more than just that separate property.
Yeah.
So again, I know that we're pretty diligent on that. The engineers have been, pretty diligent on that as well. I'll report back on this particular one, but I can answer your question, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
What I understand is it expanded the property, and so you need a second feed in there. That's fine. I now understand. Okay.
And we like Clover.
Yep. Better believe it.
No, they've
good thing.
expanded a
I
lot.
want to encourage people to do more.
Okay. Is there any other
If
questions?
it's just due to expansion, it sounds like they're trying to keep the loop. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna diversify the load. You can put all the load on one cable.
Yeah, that may be narrow.
So I don't know if it's for reliability to provide a second feed to be able to keep people going if the cable fails.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or if it's because the load's growing so much, they can't put it all on, say, one phase and they need to bring a second phase.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not clear, but
They pop buildings in like popcorn on that and have it development. It's amazing.
Any further questions on the budget, on the capital budget? If not, I guess the CAB has to go first.
Are we doing any consideration on the staffing for the tree? I mean, is that gonna be discussion on?
Here's what I recommend. The staffing,
I'm in support of what's in there, but I know there was discussion.
yeah, so I can do it either way. I think what my request would be that we approve the capital budget and that we do some additional analysis on the tree crew, because that will impact primarily the operating budget. And then on the 15th, we go back and again, it's 2.5, 3 weeks away. And that's not perfect, because at the end of the day, if we do the outsource model, we're going to add $800,000 to the operating budget. It'll have a small impact to the capital budget. It'll create more funds to feed it, but it won't fundamentally change the capital budget. The reality is, we'll drop those trucks off it. I mean, it has a small implication, but if we could, out of the $31 million, the 2 trucks are not going to move the needle on the capital budget realistically. Okay. So that would be my recommendation, if that sounds okay with you guys.
Yeah.
Vote on the capital and then table the operating until.
All right. I move that the Citizens Advisory Board recommends to the RMLD Board of Commissioners the calendar year 2024 capital budget as presented.
Second.
Sure. Move that the Board of Commissioners, on the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Board, approve the calendar year 2024 capital budget as presented.
So after the words Citizen Advisory Board, I'd also like to add on the recommendations and the general manager.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Who is that guy?
Does he matter?
Okay,
I did, I second.
yeah, Dave seconded. I think we need to do this, we show of hands. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Over that motion carries.
5-0.
5-0. 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're deferring the motions on the operating budget until we're deferring any motions on the operating budget at this point.
We'll defer those to the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, then we're going to focus the next meeting on primarily on the tree crews. We'll provide detail back. Okay. Yeah. So just.
So you're going to get a whole presentation at the operating budget, or is there more to come? Just the tree trim?
Just a tree trim.
Just the tree trim. Okay. All right. So let me ask my annual question.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Ben was right.
Page 119.
What page? What?
Page 119.
Page 119.
Page 119. Okay.
Well, they could get away.
All right. RMLD board / PAC.
Yes.
30,000, we're only spending 18. We're only spending 14 this year. We talked about last year, you know, I tried to cut it, but we talked about coming up with some of the plan to spend that money. Because we're actually looking that into the rates, you know?
Access
Yeah.
be distributed.
You're being recorded.
Bill.
I might take 119.
And line.
It's a second line up from the bottom. It says
Yes,
total
there is.
variable cost.
Yes.
Part of the reason is I did not spend ratepayers' money going to NEPA this year.
Yeah.
Fewer people went to NEPA this year.
Yeah.
Yep. So in terms of that, I encourage you to go to NEPA. I encourage you to take advantage of the opportunities to get out there and connect, especially with the new members of the Board of Commissioners within the industry. I myself, as a relatively new person to RMLD now, having been here about a year, I can't tell you how immensely enriching it has been to connect with other colleagues within the industry. So I highly, highly recommend.
But other than the NEPA cost, is any other cost in there? Allocated any of the costs?
Supposed to be for if we ever need to bring a consultant in to analyze something.
Well, yeah, I understand that. I think that's. I think there's more than that's in this budget. The 30,000. I think that number is 20,000. I believe, but there's more in here.
It's 15 for the CAB and 15 for the DRC. That's how it came to be 30.
Well, I think under the CAB agreement, there's a set amount they're supposed to get.
It's 15. That's why yours is 15.
15?
We already voted on the budget, right?
No, we didn't vote on the operating.
The operating.
We didn't vote on the operating. Anyway, I mean, is there any other cost we could allocate in here? I mean, can we allocate some of Erica's costs in here, something like that?
Maybe we
You
can
did
buy
allocate
pizza.
some of my labor to the cab.
When we,
Uh-oh.
next we go
All
early.
my Chinese relatives are in
Maybe,
jail again.
Good idea.
Real expenses, and go in there, that half, with $1,000 over the course of the year.
Pizza that you did not get for tonight.
You're being respectful of our.
Like this is not our whole.
Oh, I get it.
I've already put water on the floor, so.
You can't see it anymore.
Yeah, that's.
I made the point. We'll
Thank you.
We'll make the point. I'll leave it.
Okay.
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 We use it to offset the rate increase.
You can let-
8.3942.
Okay. So then they just scheduling, we got some subsequent CAB meetings and the Board of Commission meeting. And you got the warrant schedule and the future meetings. Is there any discussion on that? Any problems, anybody? If not, before the CAB adjourns, I think this is George's last meeting.
After 100 years. Don't look back on it one.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a fun ride.
How many years?
I think just over 14. Almost 15 years. Not quite as many as Phil. I think he was a kid when it started, Yeah, I came in just as Vinnie Cameron took over.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty good ride, and you guys do good work here. We all do good work.
Team effort.
Yeah, it's a team effort.
It was a profession. Aren't you on like a dozen other boards?
I am. It's funny, we were talking about that in our clerk. She's saying, you are the most, you know, and she was.
You win.
I win. Yeah, so Dennis is gonna fill in on all of those.
It's funny how they keep going my way.
2024, man, don't rush any work.
Oh. Yeah, so you've been a valuable input too. You've been very valuable input to the board.
And I'm really not going anyplace quickly. I'm on a couple of other projects that I'm gonna help consult with and go through, so, we're gonna communicate on other things in Bloomington. I'll be working with Dennis as it transitions through, so he'll be taking over officially my position in Bloomington, January 15th. So, and then I'll be working on other things, so.
But we have 2 women, so will the select board appoint another?
Yes.
Cabinet?
Yeah, that will be picked up.
Yeah. So as a going away person, we have your light meter.
There's a glass door that fits over the top of it, but they left it in the box because it's especially packaged.
Surprise meter.
And that meter is a working meter. Like right now, it's just started. Barely.
What's the cost per minute on that?
Yeah. See, this is North Reading. It's a school building. It's 22 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And thanks, George. Yeah, okay, so then, last right, so here's, you
Want me to do it?
yeah, please.
All right. I move that the Citizens Advisory Board adjourn the regular session.
Second.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you.
I still have to see him every day until January 12th.
You want me to laugh too?
Pain and suffering.
All right. Okay, very good. So let's.
I'll stay back, I'll stay back.
Yeah. Because you're all welcome to stay if you like.
We're near the end.
Yeah, so, policy review, Greg?
So on the policy, I had originally wanted to make a proposal to dissolve or remove policy 25. I'm not quite ready to do that yet, so I'm going to table this probably till the December and January meeting. There's a couple of other things I'd like to digest and then review with you. It does need to be revised and modified. So I'd like to table that one if I may.
Okay, that's fine. We'll just leave that.
Okay, great.
Okay, and then you've got a procurement?
Yes. Okay, so procurement is in the back of your book. This is the first part of the AMI mesh MDM investment. This is what MDM stands for, is Meter Data Management System and Customer Portal. We're going to pull it up. But so we've been working on this for a while, but back earlier this year, February 9th, 2023, we sent out an invitation for proposals through Middlesex Daily Times, Chronicle. We posted on the RMLD website for basically sealed proposals for meter data management and customer portal. Invitation for proposal was sent to 35 companies, and sealed proposals were received from 6 companies. So we got 6 proposals back, including Harris Computer Systems, Cogsdale is the platform that is on that. Data Capable, IP Keys, Professional Computer Systems known as PCS, Trinsic, and Utilismart Corporation. All that Data Capable met the requirements of the IFP, so that we proceeded to review them on technical merit. Before I get to that, so the sealed proposals were publicly open and read aloud at 11 a.m. on March 15th, 2023. These 2230 Ash Street, Massachusetts. The proposals were reviewed and analyzed by the staff. We actually did a really good process between the engineering team, the grid assets team, the IRD team, and the purchasing team in terms of clear criteria going into this one. At the end of the day, so I guess you guys have to do the motion, right? That's how we normally do the motion. Right, so
Finish the presentation.
yeah, you'll do the motion.
Then we'll get the motion.
So the 2023, so a couple things. So you can't even see that. So in your package was some detailed analysis. So we basically looked at the feature function. So what an MDM system does, it's basically software, hosted software that looks at all of our meter data. We collect about 1 billion points per year. We're becoming much more data focused. We're doing a lot more. We actually have individuals now that can do a data analysis on information. This meter data management platform is basically, it is a connection of our 2 meter systems. Right now we have 2 meter systems, 2 meter systems. So this basically will connect those 2. It'll connect to our outage management. It'll connect to a bunch of systems internally to allow us to automate several of the processes, but also do a lot of data analysis and data forecasting and do better billing. It is, as we had talked, I think 3 years ago or 2 years ago, it's step 1 of our AMI advanced meter infrastructure upgrade. We originally, 3 years ago, the estimate was $281,000 as a capital item. Bids came in roughly around $400,000 from a capital perspective. And then there's annual software upgrades on top of that to the tune of about just under $70,000 a year. We ended up selecting professional computer solutions for the MDM system and customer portal system. There are actually 2 pieces of it. There's the MDM, the pure MDM system, and then the customer portal. And part of the MDM system would feed the customer portal. We specifically broke it into 2 blocks. We bid it together because they typically are related. But we're asking for approval to move forward with PCS. The total number will end up being $470,000, including the first year. So $70,000 of it is the first year of maintenance fee. But we will do that in 2 steps. So half of that will be for the MDM system, which we'll implement, and then 6 to 9 months down the road, we'll reevaluate if we proceed with the customer portal system that's part of the package, or if we take a different path on the customer portal package. The reason why we might not proceed with the customer portal package on this particular bid, we have to bid together, we need to approve them together, and we want to do that. But at that point in time, we will have done a website update. We will have redefined some of the work that we want to do on the mobile app, et cetera. So we might actually go out for a second bid process for the customer portal itself. But that's a secondary point. So from we always think about cash. Realistically, we'll end up spending we should plan on spending just under $500,000 in 2024, but the reality, we'll probably spend half of that in reality. But at the end of the day, we went through a very clean bid process. We had a lot of input, which is good. And we ended up choosing PCS. The reason why it took quite a bit of time to get to this stage to ask you guys for approval, we're hoping to do this back in August, is just working through contract stuff. So we can't present anything to you until we have a final contract, which we have finalized. All the details are in there. Our council has reviewed it infinite number of times. There've been compromises with PCS and us to make it work. We don't consider ourselves to be particularly unique, but we're pretty stringent on some data security issues. So, anyways, that's the background on MDM or MDMS. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I get the motion ready?
Oh, you have a motion first?
Yeah, read the motion.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, let's get the motion read first, and
Okay.
then I'll let the question. Go ahead. Yep.
Move that IFP 2023-01 for meter data management system, MDMS, and customer portal be awarded to Professional Computer Systems, LLC, PCS, for a sum not to exceed $500,000 pursuant to MDLC 164, section 56D, on the recommendation of the general manager.
Is that second? Second. Okay, we get a second. Go ahead.
Okay. So you said you had a lot of discussions around the contract. Do they know that you may not do the second phase? So is that
Yes.
transparent in the contract?
So we specifically asked them last week if we get approval to proceed, there is a scenario where we proceed with the MDM system, but not the customer portal system. And they said, yes, the two are unbundled. You're not committed to proceeding with the MDM does not require you to do the customer portal. So yes, and we asked that question specifically, partially because of feature functionality, but
Right.
How many years of service are we signing up for?
3 years. It'll be a 3-year program.
3 years.
Yeah, so there'll be roughly $67,000 for 3 subsequent years.
Okay. And then I just was looking at the analysis that Bill put together. It noted something about cloud cover not being included, but it just brought up a question. If they create additional data points, evaluation points, capability, is that automatically included in that service fee? Guys, they do upgrades as they
Yes. Yeah.
As part of the SaaS.
So we actually, one of the things that was again, they focus on the municipal utility. This is part for PC, this is their specialty. One of the things that they offered that was kind of unique is 3-year warranty that included all the upgrades.
Okay.
As part of it, which is good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Really good.
Further questions? No, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, will you please your right hand? Motion, let the record show the motion carries 5-0. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else that any board member wants to bring up? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So, Mr. Stalman, move to adjourn. Is that seconded? Seconded. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, that motion carries. We're adjourned.